First of all, Rinpoche La, we want to say thank you so much for coming to the United States to share your profound wisdom and knowledge of Dharma with the Western world. Rinpoche La is here to teach some Dharma. His name is His Eminence Tulku Pema Rigsal Rinpoche from Humla, Nepal. And we are here in a very, very deep state of gratitude for you visiting our country and sharing so much Dharma with all of us. And so we have a few questions we would like to ask you, Rinpoche La.
Yes.
First, Rinpoche La, can you share a little bit about the lineage in which you are holding, the Namkha Khunsung lineage, as it passed directly from Dudjom Lingpa and into the present? Why is this lineage considered to be so fresh and so alive and so special for this particular time? And why is the Dudjom practice of the Dakini Troma such a special practice? And why is it the main Yidam practice of the Namkha Khunsung tradition as well?
Namkha Khunsung gi gyubadi chazong Dudjom Lingpa ne tandabar de gyubagi so di kordang Namkha Khunsung gi gyubadi digi tumo mayimpam jima chimbo yimbi kimsing kain di kangnaya chidame Dudjom trima gi chugo zamo yimba kebadu Namkha Khunsung gi la so ni machik trima namo drugyubi kimsing kainas.
Oh yeah. Anything else? North Yuran it takes in Killa, the young children machine. Taina came into any tambo, Namka Chumsongi, give back under race and Chenabasona. Tea to a tambo tella, taking at it was Chichi jail and other things to Chichi. Around Namka Chumsong again, the Tatum to Junimba. Around that, you don't take it. That's a very in Tatum to Junimba. Golo serta sa tanda garan so yongda ge tene larungar sa ge ti sa chola nuzo komba sing chore terembo chon namba chowa de dinju komo de chowa sanda ti ge tene shuksa de ode tene nuzo ge sa ja khung no to ko sare te dinju komo thungsa tene tanda larungar sa tanda kembo jime punso rumbo chege ti ki nyancham chigilare rinda chiginji ni kamaran so na jawa chamba thongla shukte kin top jore so ti kupang la tine dijum ko mo chungare te dijum ko ma ta lurgi mo ko shew shew mar thamje na gogo pare thamje ngaran so ta yongta re tin thongda kanje te tine terka telung kanje ki tine ngaran so na lungting gi jesu simba imba tang tine chotil ki terchin chembo ngani samji mi che imba ta yongta re ta ti lurgi mo ko sheshina ngaso di chotu chik de chaga na la so sartab zawani niyo mare dinjum komanin gurun buchi ngayore tine tila lopchen jalyu ba kiyo chuksum sing chung yore tine jalyu ba chuksum gi nangne tine ngaran so pema degyal sakenti tine degyar dinjum komi ki jalyu chuksum gi nangne tine chikdi pema degyal re tanda korang ki telung so nala tine degyar buchi lungting ki sinsha yores tila.
So the teachings that come from the Haruka Dudjom Lingpa, Trathum Dudjom Lingpa, are called the new treasures of Dudjom, the new treasures of Dudjom Lingpa, Dudjom Tersa. So all the teachings and transmissions that run from him are known as the lineage of the Dudjom Tersa. So Dudjom Lingpa was born in a place in Serta, a place called Serta. A place which is now Larungar, Kambojime Punsot Rinpoche's Dharma encampment. And just near the encampment there is a mountain side that sort of looks like, it's described as being Maitreya, the seated Buddha Maitreya. So it's a sort of mountain flank like this. And Dudjom Lingpa was born sort of in the lap of Buddha Maitreya at the base of the mountain there. There's no need to say much about his life story. It's very well known. His life story is very well known. He was prophesied, his appearance was prophesied. He was an undisputed treasure revealer. he was the first Dujum Rinpoche. Dujum Lingpa was Guru Rinpoche in person. He had 13 disciples who attained the Rhema body, 13 prophecy disciples who will attain the Rhema body, and one of these was called Pema Degyal. This was the first Degyal Rinpoche. The coming of Pema Degyal, one of these 13 Rhema body students, itself was prophesied in the treasure scriptures.
The Pema Degyal is now Koran Tumsati, Sertarang, Serta Magini, the horseshoes. Tine such a horseshoes at Tumare, Horshi Gombare, Horshi Sajare, Horshi Tea or the Bashin Doras against you, such a Chumchunji. And then tell the Yarambuche, Kutumare, in Chumju Koran Pe, Jesse, Guyan Kewa, Gombanange, Tine Chaka Chalet, Samje Tarsinje, Tine Jian, Tubanyam, La Tunya into Kon, Richard Son and Konange, Ta Horshi Gomila Masoten, then Tubam Guze, then Tubaja, the Radi New Rushana, Tine Jela Korange, Ashange, Shambuge, Teme de Tong to Dukanla. Tene Shamboti Dujum Koma Kudunata, Maranson, Moten Shagala, Korangita, Kimeshi to Timote Shagala, doing Silicon, Konya, Lobu to Chik, Dujum Koma Jalgo and Dotan, Tene Ashang Chala, Tenen Dogo to get the Koran to now at the Shar, the church and Mandu in Slamni, Tene, the Garabuji Chal Peveris, Tene Pevon Dukanla. Tanda de Dujum Koma de Tergali, Sari, and that's Larungar Teashu to Sari. Tini Titu la Dujum Koma de Dawar Temari Santoper Petrus. Nima San Dawaz married Peter, Tidu Petukan, Nima Dunjig Latin, Yamsha Sigatola, June. Tinichis a color with the meat and stitching material, Yamsha Sigmon, the Santoper Petrus. Tindi Gabjig like Killian said it, and the Yermulia Peptu Kala, the Jerusalem and Yam top of Mokuta Gomo with Jabri Shooting. Tumala did something to Moguna, Sarah, the Indian you cannot take on the toe around so in a Jigunium of shooting, our Mambo, Janet, they shooting Sarah. Tinicoya, the Yeruchea, Tanyam Dom, which you said, Gombo, which you Yam the top of Mangochi Koya, that's all in a Juno and Pugu Sarah. The Tindigene Koya Peptu Capsule, the name Dujum Komage. Well, we can say, in a constant, Sani, the Nepara, some double repair to US. The Chulki Pandisileum Grace, that the Germany Pandis and Tavas, then Leon Gire, the Tillemna, Kalia, which is Dosho, the Nimakashi in 2 months, the love shows in a Aransuna, Galindo Vishane. The Nidjum Coma, the Banana, Bass and Kurchu, nothing, around Congress. I didn't sound you young good member. Then say that Tam, the Yamsha from the Yimadun shooters. Then the German was a pair of Jala de Gam, the German Jacka Mari, don't you know, but I don't the sound of a person. You might do it with Suchi Jacka Maris, in a song this. Then compare to Pamhati, not in a Calvazongo, in something, the Lama Jacutan, the Calvazongo. Tanga, you might do it like today. Lamati, I live in Mukoran, Concudam should do the Tanakalo, some are two comment and took Pam. They want to make Chimaso took the name Conget, the Chumgitana, the Ukurpuxa Satachi, but the Chunchun Ukurchun chop to Josari. Then Tilla Koragam, Yamatu, Koragam, shoot the rest. The name Yamat doing this are Jesu, the name Dunjum Rumbache, Tingaran Santanyam Shalia Shane. Ta Tambo Koron Shabaya, and Shang to Consoja to Josari. No, but then Shang said to God, didn't Chungi Pandi the lips on us and Tambo 23 days. Yeah, 2 years Shang to come. Then it was a ship jitty, lips on some cousin and which a twin sugar, also in the Tachi, Yamsha, jail, jet out and lips on Saturday. I wasn't the quiet show shows. Get them less. They get on the Gala. I ring doing some show. Then let you come to Margaret Kellan, that's a talking to Jimmy Kellan show, say you do, because in they get a bad gun. I don't know, I was shooting the inner that corner, Gom no but in the Javi, and Gom not Yam on top of the international Milam Latin, Muslim reason, and Yam dog, but I am Yam dog, a mandel to it. Put you more you said, the dear focus in Koya, Paris. The agree on Duke, Joshua in the Congo, switching on Joshua, 때 급도 키야겠어. 때 키운데 강한테 람산 야 차체 좀 고마고 야 지장도 강라. 때 눈좀 고마게 가 개마송네. 당보 코로나 막 방좀 가시. 방좀 뒤주고 빼라 맞고 툭 초로 오다 돌려 네 도지 돌려 쓰고 그러는데 오늘 또 람산 방좀 가서 개발은 지장셔서 지리야 딱 있으면 답이야. 교시기지 슈슈슈슈슈슈스인데 그래서 깨친 부좀 슈슈로 내가 como peixeiro que não se sempa todo que 참 tem 냠다 또 받으면 지가 세주면 됐어 공기 냠다 또 받으면 인서 땅에 라마다 투이 이름에 당쇼 니만 잘 니만 그런가 된 라루니가 또 봐 이름에 되네 제송레스 대건 세기지가 많이 리소스 되게 너무 좀 알아나 찍다 지가 세기로 매들려는데 어다 단dik 되어래 소스데 진주 como 차단 como 또 봐 냠다 또봐 지셔고 tanto 그 공사래도 근데 뒤에 되는 딘저는 뭐지 당분 자랑도 쉐쉐 센텐데 손 근데 뒤딱 들으시게 되는데 테마 당부 걸어놨더니 대결을 뭐지 아니 그 딘저 공이 똑같은 게 표. 뒤뒤도 그만 뭐 자마되게 자슈도 그만 자도 쉬운도 그만 자시다 뼈 정물어 자마 벌어나 쉬도 랑어 세트도 그만 얘기는 이 맛이야 봤다 니네야 자가 랑어 태바니 급도 겸 뛰는데 초만 소리가 차서 잘했어 ten tamo idam ke shala jal rbi go gombi ngo che te ma chi sa te sang ke ngo to ke te ba ke ne la lo tu ge erme to shi ke re to ten tamo kron.
So as for Degyo Rinpoche, he was born in an area of Serta, near Hoshu Monastery, in a place called Bashin Dora, a nomad encampment near Hoshu Monastery. From very young, he was very talented, very gifted. He studied at the monastery, was educated at Hoshu Monastery, became very accomplished, very well educated. Then he engaged in a lot of practice, meditation and practice in retreat in the surrounding mountain areas, all in connection, or sort of under the auspices of Hoshu Monastery. At some point then, the wife of his uncle, his maternal uncle, passed away. And his uncle then wished to go and see the famed Dujum Lingpa in order to request a dedication or to request prayers for his deceased wife. And when his uncle told Degyo Rinpoche this, Degyo Rinpoche just naturally gave rise to the wish, strong wish to go and meet Dujum Lingpa as well. So he travelled with his uncle then to where Dujum Lingpa was staying, which was in Larungar at the time. At that time, Dujum Lingpa, once every month, he would travel to Zangdok Pari, Guru Rinpoche's copper-coloured mountain, for a week. So once a month for a week, Dujum Lingpa would go to Zangdok Pari. For that period of time, he would be in an unshaking state of meditation, his body not moving, not ingesting any food, not seeing anyone, just in a state of like meditative absorption. So Degyo Rinpoche set off with his uncle to go and see Dujum Lingpa, and he'd engaged in a lot of retreat and meditation, and also a lot of fasting practice, Nyune. And his plan was, his intention was to offer to Dujum Lingpa his experience and realization as a kind of mandala offering, like the meditative experiences he'd had, the realization he'd developed, his understanding, and so on. So this was his plan as he was approaching Dujum Lingpa's residence. Dujum Lingpa knew all of this though before Degyo Rinpoche arrived through the power of his clairvoyance. He was aware that Degyo Rinpoche was coming to see him. He was aware who he was. And the day before Degyo Rinpoche and his uncle arrived, he was due to enter into a week-long meditative absorption and go to Zangdok Pari. So he told one of his attendants, he said, "Hey, tomorrow a young monk is going to arrive here to see me, but I will already have gone to Zangdok Pari, so you must tell him to wait. You must welcome him and tell him to wait until I'm back in 7 days." So Degyo Rinpoche then entered his meditation. He would sit in meditation he lived in a tent, a small tent, and he would enter this kind of meditative absorption, unmoving meditative absorption, and just stay in that for a week while his wisdom mind was in Zandokpari. And this is something that was witnessed by all the local people, by his students. It was witnessed by many people. So Delgyur Rinpoche arrived a day after Dudjom Lingpa had entered this absorption, and when he was told that Dudjom Lingpa is now in a state of absorption, he's not, it's not possible to see him for another 7 days. He was so disappointed. He was just absolutely crushed. He wept sort of with disappointment. He thought, I have so little merit, I have so little good fortune. I come to see the great Dudjom Lingpa, but he's not available. I have such little merit. And so with this, feeling incredibly crushed, he spent the next 7 days doing circumambulation around Dudjom Lingpa's encampment. After 7 days, as usual, then Dudjom Lingpa rose from his meditative absorption, and the first thing he did was ask his attendant, hey, did that monk I mentioned arrive? And the monk said, yes, he arrived the day after you entered your meditation. And he said, good, tell him to come and see me. So the attendant went off and called Delgyur Rinpoche. He was so happy that now he finally had the chance to see Dudjom Lingpa. Like I said, he had the intention, the wish to offer as a kind of mandala offering to all of his meditative experience, realization, the dreams and visions he'd had. So he was called to see Dudjom Lingpa. He was over the moon. Just as Delgyur Rinpoche entered the tent, Dudjom Lingpa's attendant was pouring Dudjom Lingpa a cup of tea. So he arrived at that moment. Dudjom Lingpa, the first thing he did was lean over and grab Delgyur Rinpoche by the cuff of by his throat, by the clothes around his throat. And then he took the knife that he wore around his waist, and he slapped it 3 times. He slapped it against his thigh and said, hey, if you've got something to say, say it. Dudjom Lingpa was a great master, right? He was an enlightened master and a very wrathful master. He was like Dorje Driller, right? So he grabbed Delgyur Rinpoche by the neck, shook him, and 3 times slapped his knife 3 times against his thigh and said, whatever you have to say, you say it. At that moment, Delgyur Rinpoche was just filled with fear, and the fear then kind of totally emptied his mind. All of the things he'd been planning to offer and share just disappeared, and in that moment his mind merged inseparably with the Guru's wisdom. His realization and Dudjom Lingpa's realization became inseparable. Dudjom Lingpa then said, okay, that's fine. He said, okay, that's fine. So Dudjom Lingpa had seen through his clairvoyance. He already was aware of all the experience, realization, and so on Delgyur Rinpoche had and had wanted to share with him. Another thing that happened at this point was, so I said that Delgyur Rinpoche entered the moment tea was being poured, right? So in Tibet, especially in this area, it's very, very cold. So when you have hot tea, you have a lot of steam coming off the tea. At the moment, at this point of Dudjom Lingpa and Delgyur Rinpoche's meeting, some light rays kind of struck this rising steam, and in that orb of light, Delgyur Rinpoche had a vision of the 5 families of Truma, of Todikali. So in this first initial meeting of Dudjom Lingpa and his disciple Delgyur Rinpoche, Delgyur Rinpoche had a vision of the deity, the Yidam deity. He recognized directly Rigpa. He saw Dudjom Lingpa as Buddha in person. Their realizations merged, and this was the first meeting between this guru and this disciple.
Tene Delgyur Rinpoche Dudjom Rinpoche kunta losum shi ring de la tene tene minute ta te exact ngi cha ko mu ta lo ji tin sa da ga lo ti jam na ten tene ring de Dudjom Rinpoche kunta la tene chu yong su zo ba Dudjom ko ko chu yong su zo ba ha ba do choma ge chu ko yong su zo ba sen tene nyam su lang tene ta to ba dong ne ji ya bu ngo cha sa sa de tene tene de be ka so anga di du she ge ma wo she na ga mo ko do re Didile shedu kantene nimache Delgyur Rinpoche la milamji bi tang res. Ta lo ma pe ta chi ngone ge Delgyur Rinpoche ne Delgyur Rinpoche re ta chi ta sto ban den go yesa ma chi. Lam sang ne ta tam ji yön den tam ji kong du chu ju go se do ba. Didn't do Gala, did the again, but didn't you do Casa, you might say Milam Tangas. The Milam is down to come up, shell which should be the dinner, some jumped in the Gucci doos, no much jumped in the Tubicucci. Didn't the Tatla charge or that Mamboka, Monday, Kipu, which in dead doos. The pension she would in the Latin, shoot down my dog down to the you second now. The dog chatting, didn't tell a church or that in a jumbo piece you can treasure. Didn't let you call Milan Tangres. Milan Tang, the Milan the chance and I'm good at Milan Salwood, Milan, hit the door to Kaina, suddenly. Tene Shawaya Lam, Tene, Dijon with Shuria, Tangal, the mountain, the Milan to the mission, the Karinas, Tene, Dijon Jashudu Kangla, the matter of Dijon was or Tai Kerang in pretending a real race. The Shelgi Chutem Mares, Kang Butcheres, County Series, small galas. Did now typical the Tuba Mares, the Chiran race. The year La Chachi would up, put and Zoe taking them to Kula Mom, because Lomatino Hing, Mom gave a guitar race. Nepangong Yapon on a method and ship, Yaput and Metal Mango told you, think you're Jinda down, call Mom, we gave it tender ray. Takeran, County Celebrity to Bajam, to attend to Jam race. This one is. Then this one to come out in it, they get a single lasso, like a Gallian, on that, Peku getting Tuxi Chene, Talamika Chura, the Pegins, and the Yachomas, the night that Norwegian Moshe, the Amagatos disturb cherry, Amagata to Yungumare, and they were the Ninga looking gorilla, the Amalcom, the packets in Yambushe, the Shidu Kanaka to Gayungi, Sessilong eating a song, and last with that Norwegian booty. Direction about good in the Lamnitini, the Yarcomate, Re Yangarisho Ya Pebris, Ningari Pebne, Tampunisho, Latine, Lanchin, Sam Pupaskin, Jerry Gambuzi, Dam, Tell them Losum should do Galatine, Madame Kandugi, Lungtine Karan, Namka Chunson Dogre, singing the Lungi Kansan, Workaruchi, in a long nugget of Pupatine, Lanchin Puni, Lambuma, Lanchin Puni, Tatter, Namka Chunson, the Jadisuni. Then they get a jala as a mystical team, Mativa, Talumba, the Passage Gachimoro. They did jala as in it. The name mystical catch up to Tommy, but the jala 66 pebne. The name Lamka Kiva, the Namka Chunson, Namka Chunson, Sogas Martin, Namka Chunson, mean the jail, the year which is jail title. Then this subject can take your tickets, did the judge with it in Namka Chunson, what the fair blues. Yatati, briefly, they should have done motion more.
So, after that first initial meeting, then Degye Rinpoche stayed with Dudjom Lingpa for 3 or 4 years. I don't remember the exact duration, but I think it was around 4 years. He received all of Dudjom Lingpa's teachings, all of his treasure teachings, especially Trema. Received all of those transmissions in their entirety. Of course, his mind had already merged inseparably with Dudjom Lingpa. He'd already recognized Rigpa. I will tell this story just in short, right? Otherwise, we'll be here for a long time. He received all the teachings from Dudjom Lingpa. He was a very, very superior disciple. Then one day, he had a dream in which he saw a crystal stupa, and inside of which was Buddha Shakyamuni. Buddha Shakyamuni was surrounded by lots of animals like deer and birds, wild deer and birds, and also by wonderful rolling meadows filled with wild flowers and flowing streams. This beautiful, like exceptionally beautiful, unusually beautiful scene. When Degye Rinpoche woke up in the morning, he went to share the dream with Dudjom Lingpa. And Dudjom Lingpa's immediate response was, the area, the area in which you can benefit beings is Ngari, another area of Tibet. The stupa in the dream is not a crystal stupa, it's Mount Kailash. The Buddha Shakyamuni inside the stupa is not Buddha Shakyamuni, it's you. And the animals gathered around Buddha Shakyamuni are a sign of your future students, the sign of you gathering a great community of students around you. The flowers and water filling these rolling meadows are a sign of having a sign of you gathering excellent patrons and supporters, an excellent entourage of patrons and supporters. So Dudjom Lingpa interpreted, or rather sort of unraveled Degye Rinpoche's dream like this, and then he said, this being the case, you need to leave for Ngari right now and start gathering disciples and benefiting beings. So Degye Rinpoche did just that. He heeded the command of his guru. One needs to obey the instructions of one's guru, right? So he did just that, and he left for Ngari. That said, he actually wasn't able to do this immediately because he had a bit of a difficult time with his mother, who really resisted him leaving. So that took a bit of time for him to sort of find a way to leave. He reassured his mother that he would come back when she reached the end of her life, that he would make prayers for her and look after her in that sense. Then he was able to leave. He stayed first of all for 3 years in a cave called Elephant Cave on the flank of Mount Kailash. And after 3 years, then the Mamos and Dakinis told him that he needed to go to another destination, the destination that then later became known as Namkha Kyungsong. The Mamos and Dakinis, they displayed a rainbow directly from the Elephant Cave where Degye Rinpoche was staying to this other place. And Degye Rinpoche, without asking anyone, telling anyone, he just followed that rainbow, followed the rainbow, and arrived at its destination, which was a location which later he named Namkha Kyungsong.
Tene Degye Rinpoche tene losunju pati tene duba nyamlenze tene duba nyamlenze nyamdo tene loma tongchang mo boji diwa tati sa tongba re ngon tanda ine pe tongba re de ti dewe kyang tongba shi ore tene tinjigi kabso tene lata kuno pe ti ngari korsungi mi tene tinaji gi homlo tene je karbarong mugumrong tene tolurong no tene ga tene tinri na shinji gi tanda nganzo so chumi kyasa dinzu yanchu jigne tene ka mi mambo tera tene ta michu ke jagen yo mar inver chigen yo mar tene yapta mambo ji di dinzu jige tola tene daru token ta tongcha shong re sa je dan thon na sing do de nam do de gari do de tinja mare dawa mo go jabla khuru la pa juba zo tene chine chewa namda chele dang ge chewa tene mo go ji te pe tene de yaram bo chege ya tene thongmara tene ngondro ngaranzo sadre ngondro song tene sadre ngondro da kunsalam mushalong ni dane elo tapa resong tene tije la te chomi ge zawang de mang mi ta tangbo mi sum song de se tene dune song sham de je je ni chi zhe song so wang de ji lang ta na ji mi ja pra mo long song go sama tin ji de wang pe ko je mo won na tene wang de song de wang na se je so tene ngaranzo Chochi Senta, Trobi Chochi, Chochi de Song, Tenzo Yuni, Kanga Narazo, ya, Tanda concept, Digine, Yansara Dipkuki Chana, Yansar Dim Savage, so Arte Chikutan, Tini, Joshing Chejimba, Shinto Sonia, ya, Tini, concept, Tata Dordisha by Nanjan, Togal Datuma. Tini ngaranzo ki tanda nilurang jungla sobi ki tita jama tsawang meba tini logic na tasungyo sari tini tina shinji tini lo mangbu ki tikang jang tini sacha tamche ki ngaranzo tanda yosa ki tini ngari dang lo dang ta tina chi lata kunung piti cho dang tini tanda tini ngari korsung ki sacha ta tina so tamche la rilung tamche dejeram puchi loma ki tsamla tegi lo sun tanda sun kang some taking council did you know decoration yang suyoga tene te gunga деген tel nyung mar yo marse gunga peje chewa ja sa jengop chu tukchuma de yo marse tene gunga de tabju loma tamji le gopa tan kyanzo sajari ta tu sa yo mar wan dang na jing sa yu be long do re ye sa ja de tene chewa tamji tor na su long ja tene samde te kashi losum jel long de kashi ne tene gunga maadron dawa shinga de yang de soga yarong de jam chu tindre jine kortong ram mo chung res ta di kortong ram mo na ne tene ta ti ka pe gyada chewe go loma kashi chung re ta ko anjam ro bi se ta ko ma ge gyasa re tila gyasa mo ji se anjam ro bi se zo ko re de gyam bi loma tire tene ti je la kon gelong re adam ro bi se tene je la ngi amye se ter bi se ngi ge tene da amye se nan da ta bo so ro ya grandfather re tini kongre, tini kushu chimisa tangi ku kongade, tini tangpo gilu re kong, tini jayala sakya karju nyingwa tamche nang, tani rimi gila ma rupi chaga, tini kushe mele dekyarambu jang, dekyarambu chiga loma nang trashu chaga re. Oya tini kushe chimela soba, anjam rinpoche, tini sarta rinpoche, 때 뒤에 진지게 달라만 망고제 때다 치수를 말아서 대결을 미치고 로마주 되다 깨다서 망고 요새를 당가서 쉬우쉬우지 아 고개 면도 되다 단다되네 계제시게 있나더니 라다서나 추지를 붙여서 괜찮다 되니 피디 tur고서 괜찮다 되니 진리게 다다다 내가라서 엄로랑 속에 계제 간세 연락에 시게 있나더니 단단가라서 얘를 사람 붙여서 괜찮다 나 셔럽 받아서 괜찮다 되니 다 되게 내가라서 다 엄로랑 계제시나 되니 라마 상게 있으면 백 쳐도 주변에 대단한 가서 뭐게 되게 안gel게 보버래 그게 아마게 아바레 보버를 빼라마 미치직 군삼중 로선 코너 사랑가 쭉 되죠 되게 라마 걸어올려다 된다는 빼라마 깨다쇼 쳤다 주변에 신이 말이야 그래서 전부 쪽에 명이다에 깨달아봐 이 많이 받고 잡상만 보는데 좀 요래스 되니 되니 대결은 뭐지 공부나버 코르짱 미치직 대결은 뭐지 코너를 되니 공들게 쏟도 되니 배차 먹고 보지 수못 한다. 배자치고 시리 들지는 뭐 괜찮아 요래 대디나신 송진 출발하는 그렇게 공들게 쏟도 봐봐 요래 된다 디나신 게 담아 먹고 요 장축샘 지스게 되게 되네 티까지 요래 다들 물론나 포지션은 되게 숨 요래 되게 공들게 쏟도 밥샤죠. 근데 아시고 다디 다 dorduji dejar bji namdar bji chashin gasar de karma nishu zop sar sos de kyo yang karma chu gyur gro te ta de karma chu chaka sar so dan go zup sar.
So Dagyur Rinpoche spent 30 years or so living there in that place, practicing, engaged constantly in practice. Over the years he gathered around him, or rather around him gathered thousands of students, literally several thousand students. The place where he settled, this place was a completely empty land, empty uninhabited land. Even now it's empty. But as people came to hear about him, then students travelled often extremely long distances on foot. It wasn't, back then there were no roads, there were no vehicles, one had to move around on foot, carry one's belongings on one's back. Some people would have to walk for weeks or months to reach this location. So, but students came from so many surrounding areas: Ladakh, Spiti, Ngari, different areas in Ngari, Humla, Mugurong, Kamarong, Doborong, Chimigyatsa in the south, and so on. So it wasn't like any invitations were sent out, oh hey, this teacher's living there, but as the word spread and people were inspired to travel these distances and receive teachings from Dagyur Rinpoche. These were students who were willing to undergo serious hardship and actually give up their life for the Dharma. What Dagyur Rinpoche would teach, how he would teach is, through the course of the year, he would first of all teach new students the Sate Ngondro, the Earth Treasure Ngondro, and he would teach the words of my perfect teacher. Once students had completed Ngondro, then he would grant the root empowerment for Truma. To begin with, early on in his life, he would give it just to groups of 3 students at a time, then to 7, and then to 21 later on in his life. Once he granted that empowerment, then he would give those students the Chuchi, meaning the severance instructions, which teaches various stages of practice, but in short, first of all, going to a volatile, isolated place to practice there, then meditating, focusing on the letter R, then the various stages of Dzogchen instructions, which would include, and then in connection with that, teaching... So sorry, to backtrack, after going to an isolated place and training focused on the syllable R, then one would engage in the recitation for the Yidam deity. So the stages of mantra recitation, accomplishment and activity application. Once all of that is complete, then he would teach students the various instructions of Dzogchen. In connection with that, then Nangjang, the 6 month, which is in English we can say Buddhahood without meditation, the 6-month practice of Togal, Neluk Rangjung, the naturally risen state, natural state, and so on. These and other texts. So he would teach all of these things to the various students throughout the course of the year. As a result, all the surrounding locations, like Ladakh, Spiti, the various areas of Ngari and so on, became filled with his disciples and practitioners. In the summer months, spring and summer months, students would gather around Degye Rinpoche at Namkha Kyungsong, but then in the winter he would give his students leave, and then some of the students would go off and some would go off and enter 3-year retreat and then not return until the end of that retreat. Others would go off and do 4 months of retreat throughout the winter and then come back in the warmer months. So they would all these students were providing themselves, going out begging alms, providing for themselves, and going off to practice. He had so many students, like I said, but some of the most eminent, actually, one of his main most eminent students was a practitioner called Ajahn Rinpoche. He was Degye Rinpoche's regent, so he's also called Gyaltsab Rinpoche, which means the regent. He was a Gelong, a fully ordained monk. Another was Seto Rinpoche, who is my paternal grandfather. Also, one of the main students was Kunjot Chime, who is my previous incarnation. He was originally a Geluk practitioner, but then he became like a non-sectarian practitioner, practicing Geluk, Kagyo, and Nyingma, and specifically Sakya, and specifically then the teachings of Dujun Lingpa when he became Degye Rinpoche's disciple. Degye Rinpoche had so many other famous students, many who we're not aware of now. For instance, but including Chögye Rinpoche in Ladakh, Spiti Tugu, in Humla itself, Gen Rigzang Rinpoche, Sherap Patsa, also Lama Sangye, also Lama Sangye, who is Wangyal's maternal grandfather. He did 5 or 6 3-year retreats, incredible practitioner, and so many others. So these I've just mentioned like the most kind of celebrated main students, but there were literally hundreds of others who were seriously engaged in practice. Degye Rinpoche also has 3 volumes of teaching, 3 volumes of what we call gongter, like mind treasures. These include a commentary on the sharp wisdom tantra, instructions on bodhicitta, and so on.
Yeah, that is one of the number tower model. The dealer was having one Jitata Zoto. Tita the Yerbuche in Namtar, the Nitijala Satar Butcher, the Yerbuchiloma Matasho, Amire, the Nekon, some Jimicha with the Yerbuchicano, Losum to the Nitubajab, to be talked to. The name one is Jisavata, Jushila around top the end with their 2 Busha, Sani Shooter Lam. The Namka, the Chapar, Charka, Joseph, Petsy around and Chukala Gudina, Tindigrama, you're sick, the Michoni, around the Perso get a page, Mombatsoke, Pani Lama, Pani Chui Lama, in the meantime, do not charge you up with the wrong you take in Najiki, and take it in a tisha, think on the wrong social to the Manchu, which was Manchu. Manchu chicken, Papa, and Namba in Bacansilian, the children would be shared with a daily. Martin, Manchu Chazam, Lodam, Kamaron, the Joe, Manchu Tamjaka, some antication that cannot number long at the Mangulam, Godore. Then he said that in Brazil, the Nekomant in the Chenya, bag you. The need in this interior, in that time of the year, which you get them, but you chamber, you gave you this at the Brazil to the Continent, to Banyam Lane, Bacilla, such a Mangula Pemnicon, produce the the cancer was the Kong Kawa has a tamshell like needle which had to Tanda. Oh, yeah, then Kong Nimari issues that Tamja down on me Tamjin needle with a setter with their shoes on the Dotos, they get settled with their sugar center, and I'm lot of Mugum so they make Tizula Tebachin nature. In the Inki touching under the she has Hakozamare, look get you which in the mean allowed was a such a thing of Kong, Ton, and Talo, to shoot at them to go your did donate Tantayan. Then we come to the Tembasalo, then in the Koran Gita, she loved him in Girva. That machine Conga Loma Tamchilla would give her a year a day, a certain budget in the race. Then Kong is Sela, then they get Kuntangipa, Tangipala, they get Kutung race. Then they get cook on Dijum Comiglo Machilla, Chogan, which is in Jure, Tiki. turbuti kusho tsamaram bichire di ngi dine ngazo bala akure kansata punja ngi akure kusho tsamaram bichite konna ba ni di sartaram bichi yang loma mango chungre sartaram bichi loma chigle chig mango shiu dine ta ngune kecha yoba ta yamle yoba mango chung yore ta pe na kecha shigena ta ngora ngazo kecha kelong sonam sagento lama kata sagento lapratma pema control sagento ta sambi mechewe chungor ta konsu nanta shepe pema control ingire 네 배마 컨트롤은 배 세직이 지금 배 메기 된게 다치 패진 젤리 도로를 제레스 유케스를 요 된게 되네 로마충요레 대티나 신치게 갱에 수점 잠조서 갱도 땅다 배 망보 의식로 맞아 다 장가 잠을 자서 매 된저 망보지 중요해 대티인도 간다 된저 탐질한 남들 리리요레 어야 되는데 되는다 몸로로 또 먹음 카르바롬 저서 셉터는 보지 로마 맞춰 요 말. 대인나야 다 공기 주버생이 로마 이나니 저기 때가서 바라 신거든. 부셔 청하는 무슨 일이스? 되네 가서 바라 신뱀니 되네 공기세를 총 되네 뭔지 빼 뭔지 쉬고 중요해. 뭔지 시당 당가라서 뭔지 시당데 빼 원면하고 그렇게 뜻이나 신치는 뭔지체. 되네 바라 신뱀소야 되네 나랑서이나 되게 되네 주님께서 코로나에 들어도 총만난 거기 실직도 도지돌리 딘존 무지걸라 말이 바라데 지트리시 도지게 코로나자빌라 성기미 지트리시 도지 성경외나 신때 버지그다 딘지트리시 도지 군디나드니 지탄다 망망보생 드네 디에세한테 강나드니 공게 tal 남들나라 도지돌리 통해서 드네 거바라 문에 샬식서 버다 문도 kir비게 된다게 되네 중요해 제 초만 놈에게 샬식 바로 이로지요레 드네 나란스 바라데야 그 구체랑 삼랑 슈팅시래 로숨 쇼와 쇼레 되네 로숨 많이 나야 돼 로르를 다와 투투 숨 아주 중중이 되거나 아주 발라데 삼카장 슈팅에 통하게 댕기도 가와이나에 지 강바지나 삼나 바게 삼대게 나온가 뭔고지 되네 댕기 참 쉬고도 바야 뱀미기 냠네 yap는 그래 되네 콩래 되네 디제가 되네 구쇼 상황을 보지래 구쇼 상황을 보지 연된 첨부래 공구연 첨부래 준주 첨부래 맞아 남과 경동 같은 법에 편타고 사자 가사칼라페 왕송 농송 치송 되네 된다베 제네다 문에게 남과 교송 때마 다르게 주일라 나랑 빠래래자 회제 구쇼 상황을 보지대 그진 치야지도 맞아 발라 슉슉슉 되게 dum부 무주승에 율니여데 무준이야 dum부 별명 많이 걸어서는 되게 지래 회제 대마를 회도 맞아 별 말고 슉슉슉 되게 때 슈지슈스나 그런 냐르데 말 뱀메기 냐면 다다나 데 슈데 때때 인디가 아고 상황을 보체데 때 사자 무조건 그 뱀메 최모 무슨 되지네 되니 때때 대결 공메기 최다 센터를 붙이기 최탐 제단다 대기 공도 쉬어 쓰겠나 진짜게 뭐니 슈도 버도 되네 엄로랑 쳐들 송제 나랑 충중 롱아 두 딩기 거치는 되네 바라 신배 군데네 나랑 처음이기 용수 저봐 아 이게 되네 아고 붙이 어떤 바라 군데네 쉬어인 되네 단다 공군들라 구시성으로 붙는 쉬어래 되네 다 구시성으로 붙였다 가서 바라 쉬어리 단다 뒤세게 나신 지게 되네 조용마 아미사도 접기를 손도 되네 뒤나신게 무금가마로 손도 되네 나랑서 엄로로 마삼나 되네 야 엄로 티데 탐절라 다 얘기네 양리기 양식 거버서겐들아 양 kar마로 뭔가 엄로 티데기 탐절 좀 대알아 치son도 근데 최고 용서 남과 경고 쉬고 용서 저거 살쭉 륜송에서래 대전서 탐지는 가서 바라신 법다 그 정말 무지가 샘바리 된 나랑게 있네 바라신 법분들한테 된지 뭐 상라서 사절에 되는 거랑 남과 경고 때 최고요 그래서 제가 그 중중에 로마도 배 중중에 very young 디니티 제라 내가 고쇼 상황을 무지 kunjuna 되네가 알로 이슈스 레베가 되네양 차 상황이 쉬어 메시지 나랑 순낭신이 저동 년살도 아데도 차장 전에 지금讲的 제가 인스 됐다 나랑 저게 루기티다 그 상황을 무지 바라를 중에 뒤슈 살송 나랑게 암니기 루기 뒤슈 다디 아바카와 아마카와게 들을라면다 드링쇼 중에 숨대 거로래 이제 쳐서 막 견선대 쳐서 직시가 나온다 샤동 사고도 뒤뒤 그마다 나랑서 들을 때니 디젤이 저데 니야 단다 티나신 뒤주바 마시바시네다 엄로 살니 숨중이 시살이 니 살니 차선 권이 주도 버셔베 대양 가시 미카시 계절로는 그런 익스프레스 글로숨 되게 지니스야 된소 니니 숨숨들이야 미레레라야 미니니 숨숨나야 티고네 주도 근데 살찌니 시다 니야 회제 살숨서 시지 남과 경선 그런 트리진지네 시베인스 나랑서 그 기반이 되는데 이 로르기다 아미는 뭐지 로르기를 하거나 Kiran so Namka Kyungsong website on Tarosi Tinanga Lurgu Tab de Uya Pujila Shati Kiran Tinang Tanaya. What do you use? Yeah, that's it.
So, if we, I could tell all this in more detail, but that would take even more time than I'm already taking. So, Seta Rinpoche was one of the best students and main students of Degye Rinpoche, the first Degye Rinpoche. He followed to the word the commands and instructions of his guru. He stayed in retreat for a long time, practiced ardently, accomplished signs of accomplishment. He gained like total mastery over the elements, the physical elements, and other sort of miraculous powers as well. He had such great or fine mastery over the four elements. Like the element of water was just entirely under control. He could just bring on rain when he wanted. He could stop rain when he wanted. So much so that he became known as Pani Lama, which means water guru. He was that kind of a real Mahasiddha in that way. He also in Humla at the time, even though most people there are Buddhist, people for whatever reason were practicing blood sacrifice sometimes, sacrificing animals, and he put a stop to all of that. Hindus, sorry. Hindus in the area were practicing blood sacrifice, and Seta Rinpoche put a stop to that. He became a renowned, celebrated teacher. He helped, he really made Degye Rinpoche's teachings flourish and spread far and wide. Wherever he went, because of the strength of his own blessings and power, I guess we can say, wherever he went has now become a kind of like a pilgrimage site. Like throughout Humla, there are now places where people go, to make pilgrimage, to pay homage. Like, for instance, up on one hillside, there's a boulder where people say Seta Rinpoche once sat. That's now a pilgrimage site. People honor that boulder because Seta Rinpoche once sat down on it. It's quite extraordinary, like most other teachers, those sorts of details of their lives would be forgotten, It's 80 or 90 years since Seta Rinpoche passed, but still people have that kind of strength of devotion and memory of all of his deeds. Such is the power of his blessings and the kind of teacher he was. So that's just in short about Seta Rinpoche. There is a biography of his life, so you can read much more about him and his amazing life in there. His son, so Seta Rinpoche, one of Seta Rinpoche's son, was the second Degye Rinpoche, so the incarnation of the first Degye Rinpoche, and Degye Rinpoche was my father. Another one of Seta Rinpoche's sons was the reincarnation of Tsokang Rinpoche, one of Seta Rinpoche's other students. Reincarnation of one of the first of Dudjom Rinpoche's disciples, and that was my uncle Agut Sawang Rinpoche, who's my father's brother. And both of these, so my father and uncle, Degye Rinpoche and Agut Sawang Rinpoche, they were both the main upholders of the tradition and upholders and kind of spreaders of the tradition, of our tradition. There's so many other disciples of Seta Rinpoche as well, like Gelong Sonam and Pema Kongtrul, this amazing practitioner who almost attained rainbow body in full, like almost manifested the full rainbow body. Gen Suchum Zangpo and so many others. Lama Kada, Lama Sangye, yes. So many others, really literally beyond count actually, and each of these accomplished masters have their own namtar, or their own liberating life story. So my father, the second Degye Rinpoche, he received the Namkha Kyungsong tradition in its entirety. He then practiced it accordingly, so he upheld that tradition within himself. He did a huge amount of retreat practice. Through that he attained direct visions of Truma. He was also a student of Dudjom Rinpoche, Jigdal Yeshe Dorje, and he had an incredible devotion to Dudjom Rinpoche. He really saw him as Buddha incarnate. And later on in his life, having received all of the transmissions of Dujum Rinpoche's, Jirayeshe Dorje's own treasure teachings. He practiced and then had a vision of Dorje Drolo. You could say he had a vision, or he manifested or actualized Dorje Drolo. My father spent most of his life in retreat, so 3-year retreats, and also many shorter retreats. He was usually in retreat for around 5 or 6 months of each year at least. My memory of him as a child is that my father was in retreat most of the time, a large amount of the time. My uncles and my father's brother, Kujot Sewon Rinpoche, he was also an excellent practitioner, an excellent lama, and he taught very extensively. He also traveled a lot, so through the different areas in Humla and the surrounding areas like Mugum, Kamarong, and so on. And he did a lot to spread the Namkha Kyungsong teachings, more actually than my father, to spread the teachings. My father, for the most part, stayed just in one place. He didn't travel much. But that said, when I say he just stayed in one place, it wasn't like he was just sleeping. He was engaged in serious practice. But my uncle traveled a lot and taught extensively. So he taught the whole cycle of the Truma teachings according to the Namkha Kyungsong tradition, maybe 5, 6, or actually maybe even 7 times throughout his life. So guiding students through the whole cycle, beginning to end. In the same way, following the tradition established by Seto Rinpoche. So yeah, that was just briefly about my father and uncle. I received all of the teachings of this tradition from my father and uncle when I was young. When I was very young, and was trained in all of these teachings from my very early years onwards. When I was around 5 or 6, I received all of the transmissions, empowerments, transmissions, and instructions from my father. But then when I was a little older, around 20 or so, I received them again from my uncle in their entirety. And at that point, then I actually applied them as, for instance, when we received the instructions on going to a volatile place, then I went off to a volatile place, practiced for 7 days, and came back, and so on, as the tradition demands. So I received 2 times the whole cycle of these teachings from my father and uncle, and was trained by them in my early years. As for myself, I've transmitted the full cycle of these teachings twice so far in my life, twice in full to larger groups. In addition, I have taught a few times to individuals, or like groups of 2 or 3 people who wanted to go on 3-year retreat. I've taught in smaller groups a few times, so maybe 2 or 3 times I've transmitted these teachings in full. Like I said, this is just really in brief. If you want to learn more about my father and uncle, and also myself, there is a brief account of our lineage on our website, available on our website, so you can read more about it there. 진납 남그 경성기 기부디 진납 첨부 임비 균생
알레 진납 첨부 임비 균생디 강아르스나 다 백나 담보그로 랍서 딘좀 고마다 담분이 쉐라 디게고 고마디 초마나무 그 샬무스데 데게 딘좀 고마게 샬색토 룽덴종 로바 데니 초메게 텔룽 나라야 데니 데게르 부체 베 미게 데네 가서 초미게 난저리인스 공라틴 트바트비글로마 자용사이스 디토킹 사체텔라 딘 샹고링스 밍 토고여스 디네 창라 도르지게 넘불인스 텔룽데여 당가 룽장 모고로 뭐야 딘디진이 디네 딘주는 부체 꼭 고마게 최탐비나 사슈도 초만나무래 초만나무게 쳐다디 되게는 부체 디네 되게 디네 쳐다게 로마조네 서다른 부체래 디네 서다른 부체 임비 균생게 공 초마게 냠nen체 초벽을 접어톱네 지금은 라운드도 경라마 뭐네게 지금 강라 이나에 다지 도봉은 두기르게 남아이마다 용다 사들때 대주박이 접어버려 딘데 인도 강라 디네 초마디 질럽신 아주 지구래 다 초망고니 짬로니 버기네 접어친거 버기네 가라바라 간세 도걸 특집그 버도 초마 코런 거랑 강신에 돈박은 돈당만 나와 디니 냠낸 지당디 지금 짱이 고 짬로니 먹이니 그 죽네 버기 버리 바란소에나 디네 도걸 특집 버도 로숨기나가 플치차 냠내지기도 표지 가서 뭐도다 네 단다 내가 뭐마도 얘기해대 디나신게 있어서 그래 딱 가서부터 냠내기 거라고 나라서 프랙티컬도 요거데 표지 남가 경조만도게 초마직 부그세 다시나 있다 뭐 우리 여러 디네 진짜데 되게 인생이야 스페셜리 인기래 디양 라마리리 말가서 오늘 여기 치와 단다디 두바 톱도 쓰긴 답이 캐와 가장 뭐마 가시 길고리 가시 싸게래 이래 진짜 이나야 되는 제가 대결은 보실로 맞다 탐만 있던 식 된데네 예 되네 두바 톱이 샤바레스 되이나 맛이 송송도 말아서 규선나라 진짜 얄바치도 말도 탐지도 얄바치도 말도 탐지도 사직도 상 탐지도 그랬어. 대인들가 망부도는 지안도 말했어. 내 딜럭스게 나진지 남고 경선도 처마 직부도 되가. 대 처음에 라데나네. 되네 이담 계시아서 탐지도 되고 된대야. 대 처마 직도 강해서 말 도걸 특주도 제와 탐지 처마 코는 거 쳐코는 저강 코는 나왔다. 대 요딩이 된대지게 계지도 뭐 많이 메지가 요래. 순바디 되네 디드네 최규직고 많이 바기 네 최규 되기 때문에 두번 문제 교류도 굉장히 당 아마도 탑지 연주 탐지 되더니 비지 처음이게 시작을 더 되게 한다고 처음이게 되네 냠링이 거니 지금 조치 더 되게 되네 샤바래 디인디 가운데 기바 키보드 파고 되더랬어.
So second part of the question is so that was with that we've covered the lineage, right? How the lineage has been transmitted up till now. Now let's talk about the special qualities of the Namkha Kyungsung tradition itself, like the lineage itself, and also Truma. So Degye Rinpoche, the very first time he met Dujung Lingpa, he had a vision of Truma, right? He had a direct vision of Truma. Truma is the most profound of all the various treasures that Dujung Lingpa revealed. So Degye Rinpoche had this immediate vision, had this vision of Truma during his first meeting with Dujung Lingpa. He was also there are also prophecies about Degye Rinpoche's appearance in the treasure scriptures. There are lines of scripture that I could go through. These lines of scripture prophesying Degye Rinpoche. If I were to go through those lines, that wouldn't take up too much time. But for instance, it says. This master called Degye Rinpoche will appear. He will have 100 accomplished disciples. He will settle in a place called Chogyal. He's the incarnation of Vajrapani and so on. He was also the prophesied Dharma holder of the Truma teachings of Dujung Lingpa. And his heart son is Seta Rinpoche, right? So another special, that's one thing, this kind of prophetic connection from the very beginning that Degye Rinpoche had with Truma, with Dujung Lingpa's Truma teachings. That's one thing. Secondly is the Truma cycle itself. The Truma cycle of teachings, as maintained in the Namkha Kyungsung tradition, is unique, at least now, in the sense that it contains every single stage of the path, all the way from refuge, initially taking refuge, up to the practices of Trekchö and Tögal, the practices of the Great Perfection. So the entire path, from beginning to end, bottom to top, all according to Truma, within sort of the framework of Truma, or the within the domain of Truma. This might have been something that other sort of traditions had in the past, but these days I think it's pretty much unique to Namkha Kyungsung. Also from the more practical side, like the instructions for how to do this, the setup is very clearly maintained, and just perfectly complete. And this whole progression of practices from bottom to top, all by means of Truma, the Truma cycle, can be completed within 3 years. So there's this structure and this for practice in place. All of the disciples of Seta Rinpoche or Degye Rinpoche, they were all very accomplished already practitioners and scholars from various traditions, but once they became Degye Okay, so but first of all, Rinpoche said all deities are so. Rinpoche Degye Rinpoche Sungina, Seta Rinpoche Sungina, the Loma Chasang Noma kunzu keba the druba chasari ne the loma chane dine yidam the trima drubne dine druba toshi jo.
Ngitra labi ma jong
The laso.
Tomato sang jirsi mare jalwa chikdu madu thamji dubla ba tingi lungde ba
Dingo
jalwa chikdu na ta thamji dubdo gore ngazo phwe die la mango dubne tine dubdu go mare idam te chikdu ge na ta thoma namo ina re tholu ina re kan chikla ten chasam focus chige na dubdo gore jalwa chikdu madu thamji do se tisage na sinchigi ngara so thoma te ya thoma idam chikla ten ti di lama thamji de pe yenden khewa ta pje Omayan chulu shenda shen re gilu re sakya re karju damita re de gel de ger musi loma chan trauma chigla tine nyamlen chen tubato ki shatan re yes le.
So it said that if you practice just one deity, through that one deity you can accomplish all other deities, or you can accomplish 100 deities, meaning all other deities. Whereas on the other hand, if you practice 100 different deities, you're never going to accomplish any of them. So this is to say that if you just practice one-pointedly, wholeheartedly, one single deity, then you can really accomplish that deity, manifest or have a vision of that deity, and that through that actually accomplish the essence of all other deities. So in this sense, the deity Trima, the Yidam deity Trima, contains all other deities. The practitioners who became Degye Rinpoche's students, so many of them were already highly accomplished practitioners and scholars, engaged in various types of practice. But once they became Degye Rinpoche's students, then their Yidam deity became Truma, and through that they gained accomplishment. This has been the case, up until me. Every single lineage holder or follower of this tradition has attained great accomplishment. They've attained direct visions of the deity and realization of the deity. So this is another special quality of this tradition. Do you feel that's covered all the first questions?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. The first questions of lineage and family, of course, yes.
Okay. You did. Okay. Next.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that very beautiful and thorough explanation. That it just feels so warm from your lineage, Rinpoche. The next question that we have is actually very similar to the first question, in the sense that it addresses the area of Humla itself. And this question we have, we just would really love to know, Rinpoche, if you could share the specialness of the area of Humla, and how this culture actually how it is connected to the Dharma, how it became connected to the Dharma through your grandfather, but also there are so many stories of Milarepa and Guru Rinpoche also in this area. And so if you could share with us some of these special qualities of Humla, as well as how it's connected to Mount Kailash.
Yeah,
Humla rongi the sacha korangi keje kanjena the Humla ki rikshon ta nambe chin barki dewa kanjena and the kama nama Guru Rinpoche tam jesumela pa Humla la penyo yusare is something logi kanjena ene ne the mechen kang tise tam Humla rong barki dewa kanjena. Also, one last thing, why Rinpoche decided to build the monastery of Namkha Kungsang at this particular place as well.
Dini dandi nere omla di special countries lab na didi dini chitangi ngalanso gi endambuling social tagi na dini pa Himalaya social kelgi yore gi pödan Nepali ki sanza markavli kegi yore. Then Mashi Guru Rinpoche Pöki Sacha Tamjela, the Mixam Tongwa Malio, Pöki Sacha Tamjel Guru Rinpoche Shabcha in St. Pemakatang Tiksun Yori. Then it in the Indican Guru Rinpoche Kamarampoche La Peb, Guru Rinpoche Kamarampoche La Pebne, then Tandanga Tetapuris against the Guru Rinpoche Nere, then it in Chius against the Guru Rinpoche Nere, Then Gurumbuji Tini Santo Pari Pepe Secretary of Talurgi Dabida Yore, Tini, Nandang around Reling or something, Rail and Gurumbuchi Shabi Ja, the Alatine country issues so yellow one kur long debi Lurgi, anything as Chinta Gurumbuchi Gitine, Shabchela Sobatan, Gurumbuchi Gitine, say Rula Sobatatin, Tadan Jacuation Bari. Then it and Gurumbuchi the country for Chitan Gurumbuchi me marrying around the media sometime and come by Japan Road and Gurumbuchi in the Mare. The Gurumbuchi Pearl shoot to Lodi, Mongo shake you at the Cashin and Log of Chitambashu in Silver Momotian, Cashin and Log, German issue. That is the love that is the down road of some other me Tonang Gurumbuchi issue in the around the Tonang Giguane, Kansa Tonang Giguane. The Niji get to during Dulas of a joint that Anduna Gurumbuchi Shabi Macha or Yomari, Tertun Gasala, Tene Kanse, Ter Gazape, Ter Gaza the Rita Tapa Chuta, Mindel Gurumbuchi Nebina, the Indicala Casacala, Gurumbuchi Shamaja Yoma, the Dukan Gurumbuchi, Kanambuchi, Tangarang to Soich again, and Gurumbuchi. The Kanambuchi Kundula Pep, the Richie because the Latin also railing like Pep, and railing like him, the railing like Shabcha, the chain inside it, and issues so kill the yam to the Pem, the issues so gelatine, Gurumbuchi get shirt and the cherry, cheering around so Gurumbuchi and Namtar Nala, oh, yeah, the neck, this against this can your tongue out, baby, can't you should say, ah, yeah, that counts the guns of Jumu Congress again to the net and the grounds of Kanjang Jonga singing to Kanjang Jonga singing to that in Omloron, Agricultural Memo 9 years again to that in the Mangushire, Nishan Tanglas again to such a Mangu, Gurumuchi, one issue to Yellow so big Shabcha, Mangushire. Tinsugi Nang de la Tekan Shusanga singing Latine, Shelmo Kang singing the Relingis, the Shelmo Kang singing in the Gurumuchi Jesu, Jason Milan February, Jason Mila Pebne Tela Ju, Nathan the Corva Kanara de Conce, Pagila, Reling the Juni Shabcha, the Netera Dushulas about turn. The Nate Latin to purchase Tam Gurumuchi get Ataka, go Tam Tal Jumango Tati. Nation and also Lama and the Condo Lama and the Sebils and Kansas Amchi Amchisigo and congregating a Kari Karsa in Bashito. Then it did it all ye tapu, the thing it touches in his search, the dinner again. Link it near initiated Shazam Tino Yaboyer, that they loved the Mogo to Mayan to mean that to 10 game into that. The Tindicatina, you are a Gurumbuchi Pebegin, the Jugida, Tene, Tana, Milarva Pebegin, Tindere, Tete Matsi Giganto, Omlog, such a chola, Mary permitted a Pema Ongi Galositine, around Miki Tersin, Yazan, Chiri, Mary permitted a Pema Ongi Gal, Dorjitava Yazan Sentinita, Tumsat Loman down to Mare, around Dilla, Loma, Lola, Mustang, Loman down into Niti, Tumdicama, Tiang, Carbucilla Peb, and Carbucilla Peb, Tenisha. Then I took the young Ricks to Shabji, Lama Pemi Shabji, I did in I repented of them only yellow Shabji. The young Azoning Pemi Shabjis and Guru Shabji and the Shabji, Salu Shabji to Duncher, Dochito. Pemi Salu Shabji to Duncher, Tenti, Kasigan and Guru Shabji, Pemi Shabjis, Minko Pemi Shabjis. They are I told Lama Gibujer, Congresswoman. Pemi Shabjis and repented the Pema only yellow Shabjis, the dear Page Pemi Lembutu. I repented the Pema only yellow Shabji Mangusha, Lurgudo, and Shabji Mangusha, the Dialect Shabji in the The teams you got home long such a solatinita when you get take a cook on Mambu Shabkicha. Netubanyam Linze, the dinner she started in which is Mangushu, the Nepala, she wept so that the Mangushu Yore. The thing to get sent up a signy Mambuji Pebne, the chairs that Tigi Antine, near such Buimbatan, around the kitchen when we take it to get to. The name Tandang around Chitangi Kazash again, around so Gita, Purgi Rishundan, Purgi, Muniki, Purgi, Rishun Kosana, Gindunche Berge, Purgi, Jan Nepalitan, Purgi, Himalaya, such a sona. The name also get Purgi Rishun, but in the Ragre, Sente Kungsung Yori. This one I think is around so Omloron, Sodan, Mugumron, Karmaron, Tinsotine, Nepali Tanta, Pergisan some radio, Tetin and the gaining back, yes, Yaman, Kanjuna, you can guess it at 3 years, Suchi, Pavaso, the Pejichi, Mary, Bena, Choga, Abala, Jews and Mazalumbala. That is Suchi Pejichi, Maranzo, Kanjuna, Jews and other Omloron that the Jews and Pejichi, Jumus again, the Choga Amatella, Jumus. The Indian Tanda Kanjuna, the Jumus and Tisha, Papa music in it, the Hilon, not a Haku, Marakaim, and Mazo Omloron, Tandaran, Tishinipara, Kitchen, normal kitchen on Tishigo, Tetina, Pena, Nimbatuina, Sol, Tetina, Kajashina, Marks and Lagutus, Sama to Mardamati, Ihorova. The things of Tangarangi, Tinashin Mangure. Pena Sangara Solcation and Bakbas and Bakbas and Chokbasere. Then Kurtons like usual like that. Didn't get a mongo with tricking Lotons up in one of you to get Kanjur get six so Tandanganzo Omloronge, Delhi, Kipajan and Sigurd. That game young that. Aranzo Lumburg media, Nanske Jampi, most of you, Papa Gumi, Nazo Kitty, and forget him to say that Poker, only Tamaya would again do that, Toloron, Mugumum. Karmaron down Tinsola Tinita, you also get a pet among our get a Tamayori. Tinsu down there, you have to go and have a cross to get a good song. Did the Gindin Chimper song your Tetrica Nala, Tapugi, Rishum, Tina, Cola, Kundan, Gaja Shetan, among other Partas in Squinjure, Partas Hambochi. The Hamgo dancer was to root cigarette, more than Partas in Jigger, or Coatum, Tinajate and a Chicky. Did it down the pay was of cigarette. Mamma Churchill owns go part of them with that dance like 30 queening but the Churchill go part of number. Nanzalungal Torso Jagama took you Sara Kanguma to Torso Jagare, usually Angela Parchos and Toto Jagger. That tea jump till back a chance and also Torso Jab to gather Rambag looks in the Parcho the moment something over the Parso Jab, Golden Parso Jag. Mamma something gamble look don't need a sunja mula, Yogi Lusulti. 나는 아주 중도 미통 다 당선 동기입니다. 나 중도 간 미통을 배제 좀 저게 안gel게 뺐던요. torcho jagin da parda kung ga zo longba la nyonyo yo dia da lo khashi ji lu chuang ju ju ji ma de ti tin de to tin de le sam ta na ya rikshung da tra sam ta na nga zo longba de pe mi gi man ro ji re do ta lo ta dang sa phi phi ta to torcho jag to ta phi phi thong ju mi do king mo torcho jag yo parda kung jo yo re ti tin de ta lo tong sa ma bu ge je ji shin nga zo lu de ge tre de nga zo lu ya bu shu de shi 시수를 매긴다. 모르냐마 야루 송전 공부가 뒤에서 바사 공대가 자사 공주 별 남아 배우니까 박랭 일루셔. 다 당사 대당다 요래. 배우 만들는 거 시기 대 시송네. 룰렌 창사 요청해 요래. 다 리미트 단도 콘조 그런 거 뒤시에 코론다네. 당안도 잘랑당 상하라 강공서라 뒤 박랭 일루다네 샤브 잡드네 닌서한테 지금 요래. 딜로 동자 찍당 앞에 두제기 육수를 다다 날이 여되게 폐지 가서 히말라야사 음로당 무금 가바롱 따돌로서 폐지된데 얘기를 이거도 음로서 딱 나중중 거 통래 근데 남상아래 일이 되는 책임 요래 딘데기 때 깔저기는 빼미 주고 깨게나 깨빼고 깨딱고 어때 때 미리를 삼는 가서 버릭상맛 상장을 해 당상 나랑서 버릭 배치 나랑서 봐봐 술 두개 DNA 두개 자자게 100% 그런 봐봐 이거 태양 강에서는 미릭 상말에 벌박이 미릭 상말에 대 철룩 상말에 나 철룩 따달로 잡아 먹을 파리 줄줄 되는데 지기로 왔다 딘데게 용거데 이나야 나와 상게 상말에 대 딘데인데 강다 나랑서 미릭이 거네야 버릭 땅 상마이 받아 철룩이 거니 되네 거 봐라 나랑서 나와 상기기 쳤다 가시가 와서 먼저 시간도 힌두기 쳤다 또 데도 이때 임바당 되는 릭슝고나 삼부당이나 깨당 철룩당 대소 만들어져 나랑서 롱발로 둘러서서요래 연자서 범무서 연자서서요래 부수근 거를 신고 따라서는 강 항바 건당 소소요래 또 omlo 빼미 소소요다 당에 omlo 찍고를 요래 무금 가마로 요 말했더니 돌루당 소요세 말 된소리 요에 바래대 나랑 통대와도 나랑 시대 된소사살라 미설게 되네 소소요래 라버도 철룩당 둘러당 깨자 디디 다당 안 쪽에다 운이기 지랑기다 개수디 들어와 디디요래 땡아랑서 그 칼라사사다 늦지 않게 벌써서요 아주 다 당상 용도 서르스긴 요래 신기되네 디치사다 요거 신기 서루스긴데 신기 알아서 디스라 소화스긴 오마조사다 쪽숨스게 신기 때문에 나랑 엄마가 근데 여기인데 오다 근데 dinner 진짜기 나랑 저건디 금민라 다 신기분 사람 먹어야다 맞아 벽이 있던 신기 동무 나라서 근데 신기 벌와 신기 수변 동사 진짜 뭐뭐뭐그 단다 벌어 돼요. 가시는 단다야 가시는 다 염려로. 데 사당 벌와 타나 타바제 전당 연주지기 한보조 나랑님의 헨메지 이마 요 말에 부모가 함도 담지에 점그리 부초가 점그리 부모가 함과 양중만 소소 디점주를 룩스여래 한고서 빙바이 나서 얘기 정물어 니나신 한고치 니는 값 빙배칭했잖아. 한국 군요요래 추와 건당 소소래 깨라 땅땅 소소래 다 너주도 너유 땅주서 뿌랑뿌랑들 나서 뒤양 유주된 게 가지도 양 빼 뿌랑된다고요. 벽이 빼도 그냥 이거로 뿌랑당아서 엄도 얘기 유주된 게 자고요. 양 죽슈가 당 님버디 양 조금만 가지를 소소해. 폐지 군수 가지도 양 그런 스페셜지요. 나다 딘데를 되니 다 담상 아sam부터 그냥 리미기 갈치도 가져가서 리미어서 줘봐. 군수기 갈치 때 엄마 그거 보여게 되네. 다 자루당 된다 배다 링구 야던 게 있는 다 son생 하고서 살아나 링도 메트. 니마 보여게 되네. 보여숑게 되는 거랑 저기 지로 수저로 봐. 이 봄보다 라마단 도당 줘봐. 진짜 차상화지 자슈당니 연주지 치ገብ당니 연주지다. 네페 봄부터 90주당에 듣고 차 상마졌다네 리멜이요. 디디도지 술아요. 엄마랑 신다요 말. 콘수 들는 것들 아니면 봄부 먹어요. 봄부 첨부 지잡스긴데 오단지 고와스긴데 오텐데지 룩스디기 콘수고 동발아 띠까지 빼야 보셔. 디다 틴순소 따게는 냐마 보여준 칸데에서 대화숑 칸데도 야로 송생 그 갑다 티데 되게 메가지 당에 인장에 링도도 돼. 너나 로십정 갑자기 걸질 때 콘솔 빼 단다 버려 다 누스 콘솔 다 메르고와 요 말이 지겨 요 말이 다 미탐지에 뭐 토도도 딘데기 상무하는 거라서 umladi 스페셜스래. 데네 다 나닝 달로 가리 람그레 마도데 히든 데발이네 지서 umladi 히든서 히든 데발 또 수치게 미밀레사 딘데기 데 벨룽 나신지 차도다 다 단단 가리 람레오 말이 다 달로 다왕아 투지네 가리 람레브도 다이나 가서 umladi 직전에 약보래 모던 차는 기부로 이제 가리 랩 텔레폰 랩 약보래 직전에 딱 가서 예미 칼처 탐지 냠도 그냥 샘드치가 또 당한 좀 로 랩도 다 다와 가시네 가리 랩도 사리 테 텔레폰도 되네다 근데 딱 괜찮 모던 기 랩 거라봐라 로통사 망보기 된 로기오긴데 다 모던 기 바로 양 니규트비기 계제도 다 초칭인 디 야보래 상거래 밀라지 도당 대당 사당 기부 차거래 저기 와서는 뭐뭐 kalచర్ 닝바 빼린다 맞게 kalచర్ 탐지디 다 엔딩 차로도 야다 뭔가 무시해서 링 차서 링나 경아 듣다는 게 있지 안 적어라
So why is Humla so special? Well, Humla is a Himalayan area on the border of Nepal and Tibet. It's said that Guru Rinpoche graced the whole land of Tibet with his presence, that there's not even like a hoof print amount of space that Guru Rinpoche did not traverse. So this then includes, of course, Mount Kailash. Guru Rinpoche went to Mount Kailash and places like Chetapuri and Chu, many other sacred places where Guru Rinpoche visited. Guru Rinpoche also visited Raling, which is a place in Humla. He left a footprint there, and it's while in Raling, in that area, Guru Rinpoche bestowed empowerment upon the Dakini Yeshit Sogyal. He granted prophecies, gave teachings, and you can still now go to Raling, see Guru Rinpoche's footprint. You can see the long life pills that he made.
Gonda Guru Rinpoche ladi Raling ge takurla Guru Tsenke takur rangjun jar gyoris labre. Tangida tamje tongda chi dengone Guru Tsoge doji da uji tongsunda. Tinda yores Guru Tsenke rangjun.
Also, in the mountains surrounding Raling, it's said that there are self-manifest self-manifest displays of Guru Rinpoche's 8 manifestations. So I haven't seen all of those, but one of the mountain faces I saw really does look like Guru Tsogye Dorje, the lake-born Vajra, one of Guru Rinpoche's emanations. So you can still go to Raling and see Guru Rinpoche's footprint and see these extraordinary things. Of course, Guru Rinpoche was not a person. He's not like us, like a human person who just walked around, travelled from this place to that place. Some accounts say that Guru Rinpoche stayed in Tibet for 500 years.
About 50.
50 years?
Oh, big mix it. 500 years.
Why not? Okay.
50.
Sorry. 50 years. Some say 10 or 15 years. Yes, the difference depends just on the perception of beings, right? Because of different perceptions, and we perceive things in different ways. So hence these differing accounts of how long Guru Rinpoche stayed in Tibet. But in short, when Guru Rinpoche was in Tibet, he travelled throughout the entire land. And there are 108 treasure revealers who later appeared over time after Guru Rinpoche left, and revealed the countless treasures that he hid throughout the land of Tibet. He hid treasures in the surface of, in solid rock, in mountains, underwater, and so on. These treasures were then revealed by the treasure revealers who came after him. So Guru Rinpoche went to Mount Kailash, I imagine that Guru Rinpoche first went to Mount Kailash, and then from there he travelled to Raling, where, as I said, he taught Yeshe Tsogya. Generally in Guru Rinpoche's Namtaras, like the various chronicles that detail his life, it's told that Guru Rinpoche visited the 25 snow mountains, like Jomo Gangri, Kangchen, the 5 Kangchen Jong, Memo Namgyal, Nichin Pangla, and so on, and also Shelmo Gang, a snow mountain called Shelmo Gang. This is where Raling is. Milarepa also came to this place. He left a footprint in solid rock. He also made like water. He opened a spring of blessed water. He tamed the spirits there. So yeah, Milarepa and Guru Rinpoche both have come to Humla. Both came to Humla in the past. The Amjit Sepal, that very skilled doctor who you travelled to Raling with, he shared with me this very old manuscript he had about Raling that details the origins of the place, its history, and so on. Its history as a sacred site, and I was able to go through that and clarify it, we clarify it and make corrections, transcribe it and make corrections. So you can find many more details about the sacred place of Raling in that manuscript. As also the great master Ngari Pandita Pema Wangyal, he also visited Humla. He was born in Mustang, in Loa, which is Mustang, and then later on in his life he travelled to Mount Kailash, and he left a series of 6 or 7 footprints.
Humla Yangri.
In Humla Yangri, an area in Humla. 6 or 7 footprints altogether. These are called the lotus footprints. And a lot of people in the past thought maybe they're called the lotus footprints. They thought they were Guru Rinpoche's footprints because they're called the lotus footprints. But actually some
Lama Yutral.
Thank you, Lama Yutral argued that actually they were the footprints of Ngari Panchen Pema Wangyal. And that makes a lot of sense actually, because when we look at his life story and we see where he travelled, and also he left a lot of footprints in many of the places he visited. So yeah, in addition to those great masters, then in more recent years, so many of Dujum Lingpa's students have practiced in Humla, right, and the surrounding areas. Serta Rinpoche, Dujum Rinpoche's heart disciple, and then also my father and uncle and so on, as well as so many other great practitioners have come to Humla and practiced there, gained accomplishment there. So in this way, Humla has become or is a very sacred and important place. So that was a little bit about kind of the special qualities of Humla as a place. And now about the culture of Humla, the importance of Humla's culture. Gendon Chöpa explains that if one wanted to identify or find an example of ancient Tibetan culture, unchanged Tibetan culture, then one should look to the Himalayan regions. So the areas, and in this way he pinpointed areas such as Humla, Mugurong, Kamarong. These are areas that for hundreds of years have, hundreds of years, or maybe 1,000 or more years, underwent little to no change in terms of culture. So if we look at, for instance, the language that is spoken in these areas, this is the ancient and original form of Tibetan, the same form of Tibetan that we find in the Kangyur, the collected words of Buddha, which were translated and written down more than 1,000 years ago. So words that we find in those scriptures that these days are sort of for someone who speaks a more like modern contemporary Tibetan dialect, the terminology we find in the Kangyur is very archaic. One has to look, those words up in sort of special dictionaries and decipher their meaning. But actually in our areas we use those very words in daily life, like just in household language. This is something really unique and special. Of course now that is just in recent years, the last few years, that's starting to change a little bit and decline, because people feel self-conscious about speaking our very ancient forms of language, our very ancient languages. There's this notion that, our language isn't proper Tibetan. But actually so people feel self-conscious about speaking it. But actually this is a total mistake. Proper Tibetan is the Tibetan we speak. The Tibetan spoken like in central Tibet and in other areas is a form of Tibetan that has changed so many times over the course of the centuries, whereas our language has been preserved. Our language is the Tibetan that was spoken 12 or 1300 years ago. So yeah, that is something extremely precious. That was about the language. We also have a very special culture in terms of like clothes and dress. What I'm familiar with and know about is the specific culture in Humla, right? But also the surrounding areas like Limi and so on. They also have their unique culture in these ways. So the way that men and women wear their different tubas, this kind of boots they wear. This has changed in the last, say, 15 or 16 years, but even when I was growing up, and even when I was younger living in Humla, people would still dress in a totally traditional way. They would wear these boots which had leather soles, and which came up to one's knees, and sort of, you had ties that ran up your calves. And actually, if you look at ancient statues of the Dharma King Songtsen Gampo, who lived about 13 or 1400 years ago, he's wearing those very same boots. So that's those same boots, and of course everything was handmade, by individuals. There's no mass manufacturing, everything was handmade. Likewise, the head ornaments. Women and men would wear their hair up on the top of their head in specific ways. It matches also the way that you see Songtsen Gampo's hair depicted in statues and so on. And the same with jewelry, like I said, the tubas and other garments. This is the culture, the clothing culture has remained unchanged for about 1300 years. And like I said, even when I was younger, this was just like the common kind of dress people wore was this traditional garb. And that's changed a bit in the last 15 or 16 years. People are no longer dressing like that so much. But that said, it is still there. So that's another special aspect of the culture. Also songs. Humla has really special songs and very ancient songs. These sorts of songs are like records of these sorts of songs still remain in many other areas, but actually Humla is one of the few areas where they're still sung. and still sung in, as part of like ordinary culture, like sung during people's marriages and so on. These are really old and special songs. Limi is especially good for these kinds of ancient songs. Also like utensils, handmade wooden utensils, like things used, bowls and spoons and so yeah, special utensils like tea makers and so on, made in quite unique ways, all made by hand out of wood. Some of these are still used on a daily basis, like on a regular basis, some not. In short, yeah, the culture that we find in Humla and also many of the surrounding areas like Limi is a culture that has been maintained for 15 or 1600 years without any change. It's something incredibly special. In the case of Humla, the culture is very connected to Purang, which is over the border in Tibet. Limi is similarly closely connected to the culture of another area in Tibet, just over the border. Also in terms of our, I don't know if we should say like ethnicity or heritage, that us Humla people, we are 100% Tibetan, you know, unmixed. So if you did like DNA tests on us, you'd find just 100% Tibetan DNA. In terms of religion, 100% pure Buddhist. Of course, in terms of like people's affiliation with the various Buddhist traditions, that might have changed a bit over time, but everyone is fully Buddhist. That said, there is in some areas in Lower Humla, there's a little bit of Hindu influence in some places. Yeah, I mentioned Limi, one of the neighbouring regions. They similarly have maintained their own ancient culture with its own kind of unique distinctions and qualities. They have a really, in particular, they've maintained this ancient tradition of how to host leaders and people of high status, according to the ancient Tibetan government. I don't know if that kind of tradition goes all the way back to Songtsen Gampo, for instance, which would be like more than a millennia ago, but for sure it goes back like at least 500 years, I'd say. For instance, how to make tea for someone of high status, how to arrange the table and chair for someone of that status, how to greet them, how to, how to host them. All these traditions are still in place in that area. That said, now, just in recent years, these things have started to wane and are in danger of getting lost, perhaps. In Humla, so to go back to Humla, Humla until very recently has been a hidden land. Actually, it still is like a hidden land. Until a year or two back, there was no road nearby. Now a road is being built in the area, and in 5 or 6 months it will reach the monastery, reach our area. A few years back, electricity arrived, and then phones. So these modern things are arriving in the ancient land of Humla. Maybe this is good, maybe it's bad, maybe it's going to encroach on our ancient traditional culture and lifestyle. Maybe it will bring with it some benefits. It's difficult to know, to say for now.
Next.
Oh, are we? We have a few more questions.
Okay. Last now.
Okay. Okay. We have 2 more questions and then John's questions. So the next question, thank you so much, Rinpoche La. Regarding your book, The Great Secret of Mind, according to many things that you mentioned in this text that you've written, you mentioned that the practice of Dzogchen in particular can help pacify many of the world's problems, such as environmental disasters, social chaos, warfare, and famine. Can you explain a little bit about this view of Dzogchen and how it can be helpful not only for ourselves in this world with all of these problems, but also for the problems themselves?
Good. Yeah, that's a lot of physical. Oh yeah. Tini ta jide miti begi chatam chiti kana chosna ne narazo zabuling la maktu. Tini maktu bi chala nasa chala mugi. Ta tini mugi yongu yo. The chile chik gigin chile chik tem ti baris. Tini kana tambu zambuling lama ki te mokchu yong gore mokchu khang yong gore mokchu ong te dangjin le yong gore dangjin ni nyomong bala wang yong gore tene shatang arja thado chukchim bu cha nga chu nga gal go chushi go yos nga gal go chu pham go yos king lo de chakpa da sheba sa gore chaksin nyomong go wang yong gore chaksin nyomong go wang ki da chung ta gal kap ni tu na kyo da nga sa king te tu ko shor go ma to nga zo mi mang de ya nga zo gal kap de ji nga zo la sem bu kyo ji kyo to go ma de ni kyo bam shu gen na ni sing kyo za Trump ke la ma sa di la kan se North Korea ke tne कोई मिसाल शुगे अमेरिका न्यूयॉर्क द लॉस एंजलिस शुगे से तो क्यों चिक शु द नि क्यों टिंग कोले जम क्यों मगे दुलचे ना हिला शेंगे स्ट्रांग द लव सॉन्ग यूबीसी ना किस के ना सिंते ना ना क्यों से के जे छे ते ठुबा युंग रो ठुबा tamje de dangjing go na dangjing yong bare tene zoba chebo yamne se dangjing nyem bore zoba chebo yamne yabo chona jingsum chona dangjing se kala yong zawan me ba cha do dangjing de yong zawan me ba ठुबा zawan me ke cha tene tres ठुबा me go jin tres tene zambuling ke koryugla phengres koryugla kandachi phengres bancho ngaran so shoshi mi bogi ngala digo ngala comfortable go ngala yamu go tene ngaso mira tango chiri chigna chiri di shibu go yore chiri protection mango shigar chiri protection chenan tige tuba mango yong re tene kila shusho go shusho chugore shusho so go shusho go tuba yong re ti saja sone satsang ma so go me re tang shusho na dinjige sheltem la so ki jansu tamje so ba so ya do so jansu ge ta sa cha mongbo je kilometer japra mongbo je ta kana nya tamje de sa me ge sa tin so tamje de ngamzo mi ki bu go to mi comfortable go to sen ti so go ya re tene dile tmb go ne na sa yong go ta mo chu da dile tene na sa yong go re tin so tamje gyukin chi la je so go de gansa ge dangsin ngaran so ge nyomon to ge dangsin nga chuse ge dangsin de ne yong go re tingi la yong ma pal gun pa go lo ge so ndo 오브르 셴바 유엔네 도샤시당 미세주 tene tawa marun zingjurne tela subi tsobar kirus labre tindu kala 당부 강에서 오버를 신발게 주 민담 년자의 신발게 디 신발게 기회되게 레사 신발게 왕의 녀모 숙심부터 녀모부 숙는 증규셔 축규셔 들으셔요. tin데 진짜 뭐 된지래 된진데 녀모 바래 녀모부 왕의 셔요. 단 당상 알아서 이게제 거라 사실 니들 맞는 거 수사 땅안 저기다. 배 눈멍고 두바 멍고 땅 팩토리 멍고스 다음에 추셔 멍고스 연주 탐제 매버스 다 추 탐제 쪽봤어요. lumbu 탐제 쪽봤어요. 다 당상 가리 안지 기부시 땅에 가리 땅 가리 두바 멍고 두바든 잠불이 탐제 lumbu 탐제 다 탐제 된데게 지된 탐제 조금 마시고 거네. 학벌도 추구속이 조금 마시고 거네. 다 장구서도 쉬우쉬고 막 추구속이 조금 마시 팩토리 댐멘터 케미컬 댐멘터 페이지 멍고지네. 맞지고 등수 탐제에 가는 초시 매비도 더 쉬우리. 초시 매비도 더 쉬운데 잠불이 탐제 맞기비 차게요. 딘디당 안서 가수 랩스들한테 이직도 기도 고고들나 되게 잠불인데 쪼도 두두두 중요하가요. 딘디 등수 탐제 초시 매비도 더 쉬운데 초시디 강화되는 연구에서 최저는 초시 연구. 최지 지에는 영몽백이 시당 가르쳐 차도 탐지대 도샤도 제와 탐지라 빵통나 적시에 된 거래 적시에 되나 잠링게 아니 시대대 랑신 가서 그리고 송ገብ대 하라 다시 뒤뒤시에 레일 도시에는 뭐 거르거 왔다 나 하고 로컨데 속에 하고 도설 간데 베지시가 하고 세민지 간데 베지시가 하고 다들 깨져 먹고 싶다 먹고 도그러다 두지 먹고 나 디디차 장수 하고 등이 ken도 독슬람과 대전 계속 거르고 되레스 딘나 신지기 되네 나랑 딜라고 빼나 류를 나자라고 그래 류기 나자대 찍 제기 등 나자샤고 다다다 나랑서 옥시즌 약고 롱부 두자게 나자샤고 그래 그래 디 나자 탐시디 싱우부티게 나자라와 디 마체비다 당당 나랑서 카진 코비드 나자 나래 코비드게 나자티 야나와 나도스 아메리카 랩사리 니마 추정하시니 아메리카 나도라데 네팔 랩사 자가 랩사리 다와 시그니션 zamulin 캡사라 디 강진 캡 캡기 윤제사 넘두고 트랜스미션 서버다 파도 소도 디 컨디션래 디 나랑서 미게 더바치 데데는 디고 미디 도거 강바 당부 컴퍼니에스 미디 컴퍼니 잡으러 디 디움도 사이클 서스 다 저거 되겠다 데 사이클 도 바바서도 칸타 가리서 넘도 다 로켓 서버 디거즈 그 파스트 니 더바치 부분 파스 서버 디 파스 주디기 나자디안 엔 트랜스미션 저거 지거 코비드 나자디는 잠불인 겸 나자 가지 갈래죠 그봐 다 디나시 다 탐지를 살치리 바로 러시아나 차소니 몽디고 왕이 차가요 차소 녀몽 버때 당 총마시베 되게 총마시 대한 차소 녀몽 버래 데 딜레 템비 고리 나사이나 페도 체온 거래 마치바 사상할 거라 마치바 체온 거래 봐 교니 칼니 교ങ്ങൾ 야보미도 나초리 야보미도 센tin 내가 마치 차기와 그래서 탐제 녀몽 탐제 시 중식이 나봐야 밀때는 차요래 난게 선바가 마치베다 당카인 가서 때문에 대미 좀진 시리스라 버다 선바기로 mention로 신 아메리카 나신시 고소면도 나도 되게 샤르초가 미소담지 아메리카 밑에 신티 뉴욕에서 싱가포르 인삼데도 미자파리 치소스럼 지오리스 들다고 나니시나 나도 밀려서 이게 아메리카 치사고 그랬으니 미토리요 치델 야파체네 오버로드 차 걸어 차서 치다 시미소 그러 이 샤자바장 샤르디나도 쓰기도 나 비비스는 고소 나도 에시아서 사기미도 써 아메리카 치즈도 시미소 강마다 야 내용에서 기분미도 담지 마기바 가져대 칸바토는 막 총네 수사를 치고 있는 차도 아 근데 마시바데 두자르스게 먹어도 진짜 탐지 자와데 강아줘서는 영웅 발송래 영웅 비고 왕기 야컵 마시바 청래 미 마시바 청래 중심 쪽바야 청래 나사 먹고페 화버도야 쌤 누가 먹고 나사 식성 별거에서 담다 doctor라고도 남자 doctor스랍도 쌤 류래 나자유나 최지긴지는 미지인이 나자 이양도 나자 찍버도 지기나야 최적인 미는 나사의 편도 충중 간절하게 나사에는 나다 편도 충중 전 저거다 그러고 그냥 최미적인 미는 나사 뺑 알아서 쌤 미기 신바 첨부당 때문에 눈을 첨부 그런 것도 나사의 숙중 별기도 있어. 근데 최적인 나사 편도 거네 개발도 쓰고 나사 돌아 된대 그래 먹도 돌아 디펜도 그래 쿠류 돌아 디마다 띵이 브리프 시행에 개와시나 레를 나 저도 제가 시기도 있어. 오케이. Please listen.
So all of the world's problems, first of all, they're all interconnected, right? So war and conflict kind of aggravate other social, like war, for instance, the breaking out of war and conflict creates. Aggravates other problems like environmental problems, which then aggravate and create illnesses, and all of that aggravates kind of social unrest and so on. So all of these things actually kind of affect and trigger one another. We could say the main problem, the starter of these social problems is war, right? And what's the cause of war? Essentially, the cause of war is self-clinging, right? Grasping to the self. When we have self-clinging, then we have the afflictions of attachment, anger, and so on. And we have a sense. When we have the sense of self, we have a sense of pride. Basically, a sense of you, a sense of me and you. Attachment to the self, aversion to others. We want to protect ourselves. We want to protect our people, our country, our nation. We don't want to be threatened, and in order to, with that in mind, then we wage war on others, right? If we take it to the extreme. So war and different types of conflict, they all come from self-clinging and from the afflictions of attachment, aversion, and so on that are generated by that self-clinging. Basically, you and me. When we have you and then me, then we have the recipe for war and conflict. It's a bit like recently, a year or so ago, North Korea threatened the USA with nuclear weapons, right? Said they threatened to direct nuclear missiles at Kim Jong. Kim Jong. Los Angeles and New York, or in the US. And Trump then made this retaliation on TV, saying, if you dare to send missiles at us, I will shower down such a rain of nuclear missiles on your country, I'll just turn your entire nation to dust. Where does that all come from? It comes from this you and me attitude, right? Us and them, right? You want to protect your side and then destroy others in order to protect yourself. Simply speaking, the great perfection is the antidote, the supreme antidote to these afflictions of anger and attachment and so on, and to self-clinging, to grasping to the self. So if one can practice the Great Perfection properly, then one can uproot completely self-clinging and all of the afflictions that generates. And then with that job done, then war, conflict, and so on that self-clinging and afflictions generate, well, that's going to be undone, right? Very simply speaking, it's like that. We can look at now, so that was a little bit about war. Let's look at the environment, environmental problems, pollution, and so on. These environmental problems are rooted in desire, essentially, and a lack of contentment. So let's take the example of sweets or chocolates. People want sweets, right? So in order to satisfy their desire for sweets, then they need sweet factories, and they need all the ingredients for sweets. So that means cultivating all that sugar, right, which might involve a lot of pollution and a lot of polluting the land. Then once you've made the sweets, also a lot of emissions, right, in the factory during the production process. Then once you've made the sweets, well, they need to be protected, right, during transport and so on. So then you need wrappers, and you need plastic wrappers, right, to protect them. But then once the wrappers have been disposed of, well, they litter the earth, and they end up in the ocean, filling the ocean. Whole stretches of kilometers of the ocean are now filled with plastic debris, right? Filled with plastic debris, polluting the sea, harming fish and the sea life there. So all of that pollution, that environmental destruction, comes from our desire. Our wish for comfort and happiness, and a lack of contentment. All of that rests on self-clinging, this sense of I. And this is not just what I'm saying. The great master Nagarjuna said, to paraphrase, he said, when you're attached to reality, then that attachment generates karma and the afflictions, and that then expands or triggers conflict, grosser forms of conflict, like war, environmental destruction, and so on. We've pretty much already polluted and destroyed this world, right? We've ruined it. We have polluted the ocean with oil and rubbish, plastic, and so on. We've polluted the air with toxic emissions. We've polluted the earth with various toxic substances, poisonous substances. The factories and the chemicals used to create the things that we lust after fill the earth, water, and sky with poisonous substances. These poisonous substances then generate illnesses in people, and so on and so forth. All of this is due to a basic lack of contentment. It's also, in this regard, rich people are the main culprits. Poor people don't do that much to pollute the earth, right? But rich people and their lust for luxury, for comfort, for the most luxurious kind of situation and experience, then they create an enormous amount of pollution and destruction of the environment. So, in short, if we had more time, I could go through, really precisely, for instance, through the way that cement is made. I know how cement is made, what that involves, the environmental destruction involved in that, the different toxic emissions produced from manufacturing different substances, and so on and so forth. I could go through, all of those different processes to prove at this point, but I won't do that now. We don't have the time. In short, the lack of contentment is the root of environmental destruction. And if we practice Dharma, we can reduce our desires and cultivate contentment. So that will avert and reduce these environmental problems. Like I said, environmental pollution also generates illness, physical illness. For instance, recently we had the COVID pandemic, right? And COVID spread throughout the world just so incredibly fast. Why did it spread so fast? Of course, it was very contagious, but also because it was spread through people traveling by air, right, from continent to continent.
That's my work.
So because we're not content just to sit still and stay in one place, right? We need to move around because we want this and then we want that. And we're also not just content to move around, but we want to move as fast as we possibly can. So originally we all started off walking. Then that wasn't fast enough for us, so people invented bicycles. That wasn't fast enough, so we invented motor vehicles. That wasn't fast enough for us, so then we invented planes. So when the COVID pandemic began, people weren't content to stay where they were. They traveled, and through that air travel, then the virus was spread throughout the world.
Luxury, very quick.
And that was that. And think how many people, how much suffering that pandemic caused, how many people were killed. Within 5 or 6 days, it had arrived in China, in New York. Sorry. So after it had broken out in China, within 5 or 6 days it had arrived here. Within like 2 weeks later, it was already in Nepal. A few weeks later, it was present in pretty much every country around the world, right? All of that was due to, that contagion was due to a lack of contentment. If, for instance, we were still walking as people did in the past, that virus, it's not possible that it would have spread like that. Not possible. The source of all of this, again, just to say in brief, but and essentially, briefly and essentially, the source of all of this are the afflictions of anger and attachment. These afflictions that stem from our self-clinging, and essentially no contentment, a lack of contentment. The other day we went to that big skyscraper, the Edge, actually to enjoy ourselves for sightseeing. We were enjoying the view, and then I was told that some people come here to commit suicide, to jump off the skyscraper because they're so unhappy. Here in America, dogs and cats are often better looked after, better fed than many people in India and Nepal. Often people in India and Nepal literally will say that, that the dogs and cats in somewhere like the US are better fed than they are, like have more food than they do, because so many people struggle just to get enough to eat in countries like that. But then even there, I've also heard, like on the BBC, how a lot of dogs and cats in countries like this end up being overweight, and end up getting sick because they're overfed.
Suicide also. Yeah.
And even in this country, right? This country where dogs and cats have that kind of life, where there's so much happiness and prosperity, there are still people who are so unhappy that they take their own lives, right? So this just shows that our suffering comes from the afflictions, right? From our inner, our emotions, our inner afflictions. And it's these afflictions that plague our mind and that cause all of the problems in the external world. Conflict and war, societal unrest, unhappiness within individuals, environmental pollution, imbalances, physical illness. Also these days there's a lot of research has been done to show that physical illness is closely related to one's state of mind, right? So even if you have two people who have the same illness, but one of them is a practitioner, right? They have the same illness, but by virtue of one being a practitioner, their state of mind will be different, more at ease, more, less fearful. That person is going to recover much faster from treatment than the person who is not a practitioner and doesn't have those inner resources. Research has also shown that people's states of minds makes them more vulnerable to getting ill, right? Our inner state of mind also generates illness or worsens illness. So this was a very brief explanation in answer to your question. So to sum up, the great perfection is the supreme matchless antidote for the afflictions. If one practices the great perfection, one can totally annihilate, totally get rid of all of these afflictions that plague us. Of course, other modes of practice like practice of the middle way and so on can function in the same way. They're also genuine remedies. But the practice of the Dzogchen perfection is the easiest and the swiftest remedy for the afflictions.
Next.
Okay.
Finish.
We have, that's what, it's, all right, so how many more questions do you want?
No. Time is,
Okay.
now, time is, this is all. Okay,
The last question.
Okay, last question. Okay, so so the last question, Rinpoche, involves the practice of Guru Yoga as the path. And Guru Yoga is said to mean so many things, to be the pith of so many practices. It's so important to practitioners. And so can you share with us how the practice of Guru Yoga is said to be the best method for realizing the view of the Great Perfection?
ngarang choge sanga ge chö nangla gangsong re se panjo desong yore tanda ngarang cho domsum na ching so na sangchin tapchok namchok ma timper tokba min se tatik disikta tokba min se jalwa tesong te hin kan chi da domsum na 인디 그런 똑된 남이기 질럽 주거 마도가 지당이 두더스니 때문에 칼리 냠레지네 야라 디바칼리 빵테 또바곤도 교육이 도생이 때문에 숨어요래 게림 조림네 되게 되네 디바 다 되네 야칼리 임프루브 자네 되기도 숨어때 아무래 체크도 그나 뉴도 똑바잖아 되는 저바지 머리 바테가도 똑된 라마스티아 라마 집으세 말다 라마 똑보 여기 있어요 똑된 라마스 되고 라마 코노 똑보 여기 있지 그때는 뒤때 뒤질랍 죽어서 마도 라마치 살와타 우리 라마 레스 랍초시게 펜토고 말이 제파포도 유비친리 그러 저 율로 유비친리 거래 랑라 테파고 라마 토바고 마도 랑라 테바치 부여 라마 토보면에 펜토고 말 라마로 토보여 랑라 테바면에 펜토고 말이 진짜 이쪽에 된 라마라 토바요 랑라 테바에 최초바 첨부여나 대리문에게 라마를 때는 토바 공공주기 토바 포주여래서 공주기 토바 모토주여래 토바도 네네 뭐 대주여래 대인도 그 대세마도 라마 요새 지금 된 람상 토바 포주로 생긴저다 라마 요새 지금 토바시 보때는 모토그래서 네 장중 장나리라.
So it's said in short, it's taught that in order to realize the great perfection, one needs to receive the blessings of a realized guru. In the vehicle of characteristics, namely the sutra teachings, of course one can cultivate realization, but it's a process, it's a slow and gradual process. One needs to go through the process of purifying, accumulating, and then over a period of time realization slowly can dawn within your being. Similarly, for the higher paths of, say, tantric paths of generation and completion stage, those are also sort of gradual paths that do lead to realization, but nevertheless, gradual paths that lead to realization. Nevertheless, the great perfection, on the other hand, is comparatively a totally direct, shortcut path to recognition and realization of Rigpa. This is the great perfection. That said, in order for that to be able to take place, you need a realized guru and the blessings of a realized guru. So certain factors need to come together. Without that, the great perfection is not possible. So you need certain qualities of the object, certain qualities, or say activity of the object and subject. This is to say, you need a guru endowed with realization, you need a student endowed with ardent faith in that realized guru, and also that you need the teachings of the great perfection. And when all of these come together, meet together, then there is a possibility that realization really can be transferred. That realization can be introduced, pointed out, and recognized. that's a possibility when those factors come together. That said, it's certainly not the case, though, that the great perfection is possible just in connection with any old teacher and in the sort of domain of any old student. It's with only these specific factors.
The Pesha Inatine, one thing, Garab doji, Jali Pebble to come and Jabal Shin, the Garab doji Glomare, Jambal Shin, Garab doji, Jali, Tamola, Tosa, the Inayatine, Jali Kutin, Jali Pebble to come at Conga Charles, Dua, Juni, and the Chicken, Conga Sen upon the Tene, touching our Dugis of another publication at Tinipe, Soldier Genitini, Conga Molam Tap, the nation, same jiggy, Yardum doji to come out. Garab doji yang shalom sutene te suksum ne te sultu jabal shingi latine dangwa na ti dangwa tawatan te garab jabal shingi trolni garab doji to chasu.
An example of this is Garab Dorje and his disciple Manjusri Mitra. So when Garab Dorje was about to display the rainbow body, pass into the rainbow body, his disciple Manjusri Mitra made some supplications to him. Of course, Manjushri Mitra, the disciple, had already realized Rigpa, gained realization, but when his guru Garab Dorje was about to pass into the rainbow body, he was extremely distressed. He made prostrations, he made something like 12 kind of calls of lamentation, like out of anguish. And he prayed to Garab Dorje. He felt prayed to Garab Dorje with such faith and distress that he kind of was on the verge of fainting. At that point, Garab Dorje revealed himself once more to Manjushri Mitra and gave him the what we now know as the 3 phrases that strike the vital point. When Manjushri Mitra then woke up, so to speak, he was fully liberated.
Tatena lurgi mope shegyo ta shera sarge mar jambal shin series gurumbuch gurumbuch la kandije tabre ne gurumbuch ne mara ten bero zane ne ishi so kil ta tatena lurgi jen pe mi nam tar lo gore kenan ma don de chunjung do lo na hap gore di ma don lo hap gi pe na ngaran so ge ne jimi ling ba do sa wa na te kunche mon jan ram ge shal chal koron ge ne gom jab de kana jodun jab de kana kunche mon jan ram shal chal te ne gom ba phe Tini chese gomba longdra shason res, pe megi tini tabu. Tina shingi dunjum rujiro ina gurumbuchi ngozu shaljar, gurumbuchi ge te wang de longtop, gurumbuchi tina shin choson res. Ti tada gese dejarambuchi dunjum gomba ge tini gomba pe ne choson res. Ta tinda ge tini lorgi mongo yorta, tinda lorgi shena lorgi zogo mares. Ti indi kanta, ti tila kanga korsa, lama tia toba tambuchi gogare, lama tila yan chabar yapuchi gogare, tingi din zomba ina, Tini ngaranzo kargyu ki samutanga, kargyu dachi sayo, ta chakya chimbo samutanga, penchen tene naro pade, telo puki tene ngotra tanga, gomba phuta tanga, naro tene kapa kansa sana, tene digi tene kangaranzo, te naro pakundi la tene, marpa ki tene korpara, chakya chimbo gomba nye tangso tamze, tene chik lami ngotra chokinto wotanga, tokpo phueni ngotra wotanga, tinda takta reda, chuchin gyaju tamze, tinda kachang resa. Tindu kang tisu tamsi lama teni sanji yore dangwa di choyor shinda ngaran soge sanji ki choyor gyudni rete chik chinlap kin jungsa dhawu chikdi gyuba dhawu chikdi lama teni yogor tindu kang la di choyor mutik bi choyor da kyan shinda ki choyor dhagi maare sabarado zogba chimbu ki choyor namo guru dashin namki gyula gyudin lami chinlap gyubar gyub chiksan gyubi ki gyuba ki chinlap gogor matongi di machon digi mere di gyuba di yang sangma chik gogore gyuba di nangaya lama lama arga tamsi nyamcha dhawu cha sangma chik yang Porishin samar da inji ke tene chatur tindi kama juba sambu yin bachi tene ngone ke lama tobo tombo yi tene tik ta damso tisu pekale ka bore ta lama yabu pena dunjurum bachi to tungu kenserum bachi to tene dodurum bachi to ta lama ta chibu tabi desa sota ta ta tindi ke lama to kombu shiore ngaran so lengya bare ta ngaran tamje tindi ke lengya kashi ga yang ngone nyingma so na ta yang lama kashi peong na mishi rerengire ta na shukyo yi ta ngazo hapo mara ma to ki ngomado ina tidala mangoni sanji ku ngoindo lama mangushu de yorba ode labardo zoba chimu lama sagene dab chenjan dunjor bochi to ta tungu khenseram bochi to ta trompe mandro to ta dorum bochi to ba de mi ki lama to to ngaran so loma ki deba ge ma jone go go ma tru ma to khonam ki chilab ki pom to ta yin meri de jindu ko ta lama yona ya dunjor bochi kapso ya tabchi to yo se yo ma lo ma bochi to me ge mo yo ba Tina Jin, that is what Tamji you get the song, tel lama la sanji gi dushe chen silap sanji tar du juk sum re yohan bu chi lama la sanji gi dushe sha na silap sanji tar du juk lama la tutup tar du gi te ba sha na silap ya tutup tar du juk lama la thamal gi dushe chen silap juk gi mer la tin du ta ngalang so lama la dushe khande sha la do lama la te ba khana sha do te tel te bi tombo gong ju go to ho ju ti re important genzen de ti re
So another example would be, like, there's so many examples we could point to, right? So many like life stories and examples of this we could point to. For instance, we mentioned Guru Garab Dorje and Manjushri Mitra. We could then look to Shri Singha, Manjushri Mitra's disciple, and then Guru Rinpoche and his disciples Yeshit Sogyal, and so on. For those details, you can look in the histories of the Buddha Dharma and the various life stories, right, of these great masters. One example is Jigme Lingpa and Longchenpa. Jigme Lingpa had a vision of Longchenpa, a direct vision of Longchenpa. In that vision, Longchenpa transferred his realization to Jigme Lingpa, and at that point, then Jigme Lingpa's inherent wisdom just burst forth. Likewise, with Dujun Lingpa had direct visions of Guru Rinpoche, received empowerment and instructions directly for him, received Guru Rinpoche's blessings directly from Guru Rinpoche. The same happened with Dilgyur Rinpoche, and so on and so forth. So many instances of this. So many instances of this. We could go through all of these different instances and stories, but the main point really is that in order for this to happen, what we need is a realized guru and a faithful student. If we look at the Kagyu tradition, which is to say, like, the tradition of Mahamudra, the practice of Mahamudra, we can point to the way that Tilopa and Naropa, how realization was transferred from Tilopa to Naropa, from Naropa to his disciple Marpa Lotsawa, and so on, right? How these masters introduced the natural state to their disciples so that they could realize it, actualize it. The same thing happened. We see the same thing in the life stories of the 84 Mahasiddhas of India, and so on. So this is to say that enlightenment is attained through the blessings of the Guru. Through receiving the blessings of the Guru, one reaches enlightenment, one manifests enlightenment. Of course, like, other teachings and explanations can be received, but the actual realization of enlightenment, that happens, that is made possible through the blessings of the Guru. Through the blessings of the Guru. So in this way, this is how things are in the great perfection, at the level of the great perfection. This is to say that the great perfection is not like other teachings. Absolutely not like other levels of teachings. In the great perfection also, lineage is incredibly important. One needs to receive the stream of blessings from a genuine lineage. A lineage that is pure, in the sense that there is no pollution of samaya between the line of gurus and disciples. These days, though, this is extremely difficult, actually, because the teachers with this degree of realization have for the most part passed away. They've left this world. So previously we had masters like Dujun Rinpoche, Jigdal Yeshil Dorje, the late Dilbu Khyentse Rinpoche, Jojut Rinpoche, Peno Rinpoche, and so on. These extraordinary masters who they really were Buddha in person. Their students might have failed to see them as Buddha in person and cultivate that proper faith, but from their own side they really were Buddha in person, and so in their presence it certainly would have been possible to receive this transmission of realization, this transference of realization. However, it's our negative karma that these masters have passed away and that their equals do not seem to exist in the world anymore. Of course, it's possible that there are kind of equal masters living in the world. Those with good enough karma will be able to encounter them, but they're probably very few and far between. An example of such a master, realized master, who could introduce the student in this way was one of these masters was Dujun Rinpoche, right? But when I say this, it's not to say that I'm not saying that all of his students gained a realization in this way, right? Just that gaining realization in this way was and is possible around masters of that stature. Mipa Rinpoche said, if you perceive your guru as the Buddha, you will receive the blessings of Buddha. If you receive your guru as a Mahasiddha, you'll receive the blessings of a Mahasiddha. If you receive your teacher as just your guru as an ordinary being, you'll just receive the blessings of an ordinary being. So so what you're able to receive depends on, or is made possible by your own faith and your own perception. That's to say that these two things need to come together, right? A realized guru and a faithful disciple. Faith directed at a realized guru and a realized guru connecting with the faithful disciple. When those two come together, then for sure it's possible that the state of realization can be transferred, can be introduced.
rangi regular to in the that's the opposite that don't answer na deshin hinji ki was ranjung ripate 탑싱이 ran 하고 말라 탑싱기는 또 탑 간대지는 극장고 중부 빼샤 뭐고 축구 카중고 깨다시고 간대지 빼샤 방고 따죠 간대이기 때문에 속상 집자 지기는 그 다이렉트 ranjung ripate 또 두고 말해서 신뢰시민 델hin지기 탑싱기는 또민데 탑 가리시나요 또고 말해서 Lami datab tema sang, lama tsaashim chun tiri sarikwa mo serhodo mo chun ta tab kanchi tsiggo ni chen nan, ta daigo ni ten nan, ta gongwa pyo nan, ta hangi nan, ta lami ki chik chilab chik ma pyo ki parado to tugu ma re se. Tini rangi sherab, rangi rikwi lo ni tok ini chik songa re. Lami ki datin, datingi lama tenga da, rong mo de rangi mo ten chogo re. Tini lama ten tab tugu ma re, tingi lab yo ma re, gyud na songa yo re.
So, in the Tantras it says, so everything I've said is I'm not just saying this from my own side myself. Actually, this is taught explicitly in the Tantras. We find lines that read, for instance, the co-emergent wisdom, meaning naturally present Rigpa, the Sugata Garbha, this cannot be realized by any other means, meaning no matter how smart you are, no matter how intellectual, learned, no matter how I don't know, wealthy you might become, no matter how high a status you might possess, also no matter how much purification and accumulation you perform on the path, you are not going to be able to realize, actually directly realize naturally present Rigpa through these means. It's simply not possible. It is only through through introduction granted by a sacred guru. That introduction could be given by means of words spoken orally. It could be given by a symbolic gesture. It could be actually just a kind of mind-to-mind transmission. But the introduction can only be received through a guru, and with that introduction, then it's possible to come to recognize Rigpa, the natural state, in yourself, within yourself, and for yourself. So that's just to say that it simply is not possible to gain recognition except by means of the Guru's blessings.
Good. Okay. Now,
can I ask one thing? Yeah.
Yes, go for it.
So Rinpoche, when you comment about contentment, is so wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you too. And seems to me from practice of, at the end of the Nundro in the Guru Yoga, it says, "Behold the emptiness awareness, the true face of the Lama." So I think that it seems from an experiential point of view, as we dissolve this clinging to self-image or self-clinging, as you say, that we can experience that open, expansive sensation of the emptiness awareness. And there we become more sensitive, no? Do we become more sensitive to the environment, to each other? We feel more clairvoyance, more sensitivity. This is a question. And that sensitivity allows us to feel and be accountable for our actions. Is this also an aspect of the Dzogchen as a kind of method of healing the planet and humanity?
Pene yikchung ngoro kashi yikchung na guru rangsha thane nyamsha te start ne sungiro pena dene chine nyamne chiti kali soso da sindi shigne dene ngone nyamnyong gi thone riktong jemba chi ngo tru sigiro ngo tru jogro dene ngo tru yong de rangi 제도기 갑수양 랑싱기 디스 sensitive sena zornang chewa zornang cheru joa 랑이 닝 chewa nang신 ane ngoshi dan denje 랑싱기 level denje 용계로 와라 디 ane leginji le 지당 chewa zap해 디소 소보 침베기 the yunten chile ra hoyna
re ya cos
ania de soyang chi zambulingi de makchu la sopa shiwe tab the gune shiwe tab to chagena
tidelecha tide kegla gente tese paya bodo gomti gyamna oripati para tene morte ba ba morte trosu sigita dire sigi gone shikilche mare rangete pat ripati loshi chaso nyomo tamjela ma drol digendo chaso nyomo bujiga dirang minne pato te inaya tarong ripi tangcha tigitene jingone ngesemjen tamjela 닝제당 즉 대바대고 레긴데서라 이시게 온 게 되는 따와야 보통비게 따로 시켜라 따다야 그래도 얘는 따와야 보대 또봐 있나 되니 딜라지 뭐시다 준추죠 근데 대 용주지래도 스테인도 가라 알아서 곰이야 보자운데 가라 곰이야 보자도 곰디 잡도 가라 제당 곰디 미제 남도 가네 남도 가네 되게 곰도 말해 남도 졸니 대와래 남도 졸니 대대나 남도 졸자딜라 Teni ngoni ki ti rikpati tu pe salnang shenpo 지금 미기 지금 숙통 gen도 무슨 통 gen도 암쇼게 다 토론 gen도 셴바 메비 토라티다 용거래 디디 페이지 같이 곰 야쁘게 간다 모닝 옷이 젬바 코론다 차도 버서래 곰 제우 마에나야 지기 따곰 아우 야겐 속에 지기 갈라 가서 쪽바투와 지기 딘데 인사를 못 삼기도 ngama peja shubishe so yang gom jana peja khero do de gendo ngama kupa yo de gi to sham chang bu cha do gendo tene ma bu cha wa nga so yagi limela ta de dum jo so da ha bu re yagi ni dis gi je ki gen ta na ran so gal sang go sing jo ngama kupa re se to chi am jo khola ma gol do thama thum je te ser dar bo che kun te le gom ma go chang gom sham ge bu pe chang bu mi le chue she gen cha 배 종도도 투담 쇼 rinser tung tinde chung래 티팅디 강라 리파 당도 저기 곰기 잘레스 다 되게 직대면 코리글 가데 팬 도가르서 봐야 대한테 팬 도당이도 저거 친구 나신 곰게 냠리 먹고 좀 숍시에 걸 탐지가 숍시에 좀 혼자 나신게 내가 들어도 지금 말고 땅 알아서 아메리카가 축축축축게 다 소송이 쇼시에 빌게츠 고 하고 빌게츠 다다데 축구 먹고 지금 축구 짱은 이시죠 저거 친구 냠리 했는데 정글링 그림 짜는 거죠. 호텔 내가 탐지 중앙지 자자로 러시아로. 대나신 사이언티스트와 같이 하고다 정글링 노진식인 탐지는 마음에 와 잡고 그러 봐. 근데 이 마이나 미망만 보지게 되네. 저거 좀 취지 낭비게 취지와는 적시들랑 신뢰한 거래. 적시들랑 신뢰는 코르디아랑 신게 장마 차거래. 정글링 시대대랑 신차거래. 니트 상고도. 근데 이네 티차로 답에 잡게 치부지 거래. 직도티. 순발라 강아서 봐줘 배 또부 덤부 되는데 제는 슬기는 또 잡았다 다 티티페 갈리가 그러면 또 배미가 또부 되잖아 나 유로 이제 발라마 일lep송 맞지 가리 송잖아 봐 지금에 가르쳐고 미기 나 쌤랑 팀로 간다고 그랬다 지금 디 담들라 남동네 봐 셔미시도 다 진짜 또부 덤부데 연구해서 인저디 다 갈리가 가보면 되더니 가리가 보인지로 봐 근데 저는 셔는 슬기는 want to do la silgine so want to sell do 원에 제세 당진 want to do 인진 silgine 서로 want to do la silgine 페페페 so 정말로 야 당진 want to do 니는 silgine 스티치서 함께 되네 뭐내게 줬도 같다 들어 연구해서 달라만 빼매게 또 버튼 붙여 사서 유저 탐지게 되네 탐지다 뭐내게 줬도 들어 연구해서 있으라
So this is a very good question, absolutely. This kind of what you describe, like this increasing sensitivity and so on, is for sure an aspect of the great perfection and a sign of having recognized the view correctly and well, all the different qualities and that you mentioned. When we train in meditation and we come to a recognition of Rigpa, then the recognition, when we come through meditation, when we come to a recognition of Rigpa, in that moment of direct experience of Rigpa, we are in a completely open and spacious state, a kind of state of complete release from our self-clinging, our afflictions, and so on. At the same time, there is still this natural radiance of Rigpa, this radiance that manifests as compassion for all sentient beings, compassion for sentient beings, and an acute awareness of karmic cause and effect. So to have this experience, such experience, is a sign of correct realization of the view. So that's very, very good. And for sure, clairvoyance and that sort of thing will certainly arise through recognition of Rigpa and training in Rigpa. When we train, in the practice of the great perfection is not meditation training in bringing thoughts to a halt or suppressing thoughts. Rather, it's the practice of liberating thoughts, right? And this liberated aspect, so to speak, or by virtue of that liberation of thoughts, then at times one's mind, one's natural awareness will become incredibly clear, for instance, incredibly clear and lucid. And in those moments, then you might experience different types of, you could say, clairvoyance or like higher perception. It could be your hearing or your vision or like a mental higher perception. For some people this can come and go, if their meditation isn't that stable and developed. For other people, they might attain these kinds of higher perceptions and have them constantly. For some people, they might be experienced in the form of like heightened intuition, They don't directly see things. It's not like clairvoyance in the sense that they see things directly, but they just have the sense that, that's the case. Without attachment, right? So there's clarity and heightened perception without attachment. Other things, changes can happen as well, like one can naturally just become much more intelligent, much sharper. People may say you might not be sort of learned or have a good understanding of the scriptures previously, but now through the strength of your meditation practice, you just become naturally sort of learned in the scriptures. All of these qualities, we could say they're like the expression of meditation, or the signs of the dynamic potential of meditation, state of meditation. For instance, there was a practitioner in Nimi someone called Gyal Zangpo. He was really a stupid man, basically, like very dull, really not able to understand anything, very dull intellectually. He then became a student of Seta Rinpoche. He practiced meditation. And he, through his meditation training, he became actually very alert, very intelligent, And later on,
not very Pemikyo, Yabu Pei Jambucha, Chushe to Ginchare, Pemichamula.
that's all.
Very intelligent and Pemichamusamare, Kevasamare, Kevashimare, I was
Sharp.
That's all.
Sharp, no?
Intelligent, so not like super learned,
Right.
but intelligent. And yeah, quite intelligent and able to teach people the Dharma. And when he passed away, he stayed in Tukdam, and even his remains emanated relics, Rinsa. He trained a lot in Turgal. So when you meditate like that, then the mind naturally becomes more and more clear, more and more intelligent, more and more insightful. It's a bit like Mipa Rinpoche when he told Dorupten Nima. He said, don't do more formal study, just train in meditation, and through that you can become, like the perfect scholar. The perfect scholar, and then that will, perfect scholar and the ultimate scholar.
So it's not just mind, it's organism, no? Physical awareness, physical brightness, body awareness. The body is intelligent, beyond, of course, beyond relative mind.
This was some Simgitsal, this was some the Sim Zubula and Kyabgiros. Of course, Buddha nature pervades our entire body from the top of our head to the soles of our feet, right? Wherever mind pervades, primordial wisdom pervades. So, of course. Wherever appearances are present, wisdom is present.
Okay.
Okay.
That's the very last bit. So, in this way, yes, practicing the Great Perfection can bring benefit to the outer world as well. For instance, because when we practice in this way, if one practices in this way, naturally one will have contentment, right? And be free of the afflictions. Like I said, contentment in the afflictions, the root of all social problems in the world, environmental, war, etc., etc. So if you have just like one person practicing in this way, and they develop contentment. So you have 15 or 20 people who become practitioners.
Radiation.
That's a ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
And that's that much more benefit to the world. That less destruction and harm. That said, that can happen, but in order to be really effective, it needs to be on a very widespread scale, right? Like a lot of people practicing. The other possibility is to have someone who's extremely highly realized, to the point where they're able to master where their mere presence has a transformative effect on people. In the scriptures, it said highly realized, someone with high realization can transform the perception of others. So that in that, like just being in their presence, kind of changes your mind, touches your heart, prevents negative thoughts arising. But that's pretty difficult for such teachers. It's difficult for such teachers to appear or be encountered in this dark age.
It's contagious enlightenment. Contagious enlightenment. Darkness, this dark time now, is sparking enlightenment. Yeah? It can be auspicious, the darkness.
Nikdu ki nipati kendra chene nikdu ki nipati the munati ubare ki kendra che sigros
Mumbaki
mumpa
Selvi
darkness korang the shay ki kendra che sigros
Ignorance.
Tida me lama trudo so tere bagucha hero Shedang Shedang Kene, the Ripa Moto, came in the Catalan Yabuchagota. Nasa Duchachan, Sanji Go, the Gimushi here. They came in Tosuki, Rossi, not a trauma, what they said. Yes.
That is possible, yeah, and we see that with like all the great Mahasiddhas, right? Like instant cases of people like being consumed by anger, but through the anger coming to realize Rigpa, or someone's like marriage falling apart, but you know that somehow they're able to take that suffering onto the path. It becomes transformative, or like an illness becoming a conducive circumstance. We say. Difficult certain circumstances arising as conducive, or we could say blessings in disguise. So yeah, we supplicate for that actually in the Trima practice.
Okay, now finish. My answer.
Very good, Rinpoche. Always very good. Lots of dharma.
Real dharma.
Thank you. Thank you.